Hello there, and welcome to Just About Earth, where curiosity takes its time and the world outside slows down just enough for you to breathe. If you're listening to this at night, maybe the room around you is already dim. Maybe the only light left is the soft pulse from your screen, or a lamp that hums quietly in the corner. And outside, the world is folding itself into silence, a rhythm older than language, older than us. Tonight, we're not chasing stars or talking about civilizations. We're walking backward into the white breath of a forgotten world, a time when the planet itself seemed caught in a deep, frozen dream. They called it the Ice Age, but that name doesn't quite capture what it must have felt like to live through it. It wasn't just cold, it was colossal. It was a silence that could crush mountains, a landscape carved by wind and time, where every horizon was made of glass and bone. And somewhere in that endless frost, giants walked. Not the kind from stories, no magic, no myth. Real giants. Creatures whose shadows stretched across tundra plains and whose footsteps left craters that filled with snow. Woolly mammoths, towering with curved ivory tusks like frozen rivers. Saber-toothed cats, with canines so long they seemed unreal. Cave bears as large as cars, moving slow through the mist. And above them all, a sky so pale and wide it might have swallowed sound itself. It's strange to think about, isn't it? That once, the world was ruled not by us, but by them creatures too big for the forests we know today, too strong for our fragile age. And then, one day, or rather, one age, they were gone. The ice melted, the tundra softened, the giants vanished. Only bones remained, locked in frozen earth, waiting for curious hands thousands of years later to find them. Tonight, that's the story we're walking into, not to solve it quickly, but to wander inside it. Because questions like this, why did the giants of the Ice Age disappear, are not just about extinction. They're about memory, about how the planet remembers everything that has ever lived on it, and how even in silence, those memories keep shaping the world we wake up to. So before we begin, take a moment. Wherever you are right now, in a bed, on a train, maybe lying awake with your headphones on, let your body sink a little deeper into stillness. You don't have to do anything. Just listen. Hear the sound of your own breathing. That slow in and slow out is the same rhythm the Earth has kept for billions of years. Breathing in ice, breathing out oceans, breathing in forests, breathing out deserts. It's the rhythm that carried the mammoth through its endless migrations, that froze rivers into highways and turned clouds into curtains of snow. That same rhythm still lives in us, hidden under cities, schedules, and light. When we talk about the Ice Age, it's easy to imagine it as distant, separate, a world long buried. But in truth, it's closer than we think. Every breath of air you take carries water molecules that once froze in glacial wind. Every mountain you've seen was shaped, in part, by the pressure of ancient ice. Even the continents remember it. Their scars, their valleys, the lakes that dot our maps all are remnants of the last time the world exhaled cold. Imagine standing there, 40,000 years ago. There are no cities, no glass, no steel, no names. Just wind, and the low groan of glaciers stretching across the horizon. The air smells of iron and pine. In the distance, you can see a herd of mammoths moving like a living tide, their tusks glowing faintly in the weak sunday. Their steps are slow, deliberate, as if they know the world beneath them is fragile. Above, the sky is the color of pewter, heavy with flakes that never stop falling. The humans who lived then were small by comparison, small but persistent. They huddled around fires made of bone and peat, wrapped in furs taken from the very creatures they feared. They painted on cave walls, not to decorate, but to remember. And in those paintings, you can still feel it, the awe, the tremor of living beside something vast. The mammoth wasn't just an animal to them, it was a presence, a god made of muscle and silence. To hunt it was to face the edge of the possible. If you close your eyes now, maybe you can picture it. The sound of wind brushing over fur, the crunch of snow beneath thousands of feet, the slow creak of ice shifting deep underground. That's the world we came from, a place where survival meant understanding rhythm, not conquering it. where every meal, every shelter, every fire was a conversation with the elements. You didn't own the land. You negotiated with it. And yet, somewhere along that long conversation, something changed. The warmth began to return. The glaciers retreated. Rivers swelled with meltwater. Forests crawled northward, inch by inch. And the giants who had ruled the ice began to fade. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in slow, almost polite disappearance, as if bowing out of a stage they no longer recognized. We like to think of extinction as a sudden event, but more often it's a whisper, a gradual quieting of voices until there's only one left. When the mammoths fell silent, the tundra lost its architects. The saber-toothed cat lost its prey. The cave bear lost its cave. And the humans, now standing alone, inherited a world that was no longer built for giants. You might wonder, does the earth ever miss them? If it could feel, would it remember the thunder of their steps, the warmth of their breath on the snow? Maybe that's why the Arctic winds still moan the way they do, a long, slow echo of a world that once roared with life. And maybe, somewhere deep beneath the permafrost, that world is still dreaming, waiting for someone to ask the question again. So tonight, that's what we'll do. We'll ask gently, curiously, why did the giants of the Ice Age disappear? And in doing so, we'll uncover not just their story, but ours. Because every extinction, no matter how ancient, leaves a shadow in the present. A reminder that no matter how powerful a species becomes, the world can change faster than it can adapt. Take another slow breath. Let your shoulders drop. You're safe here. The story has no rush, no sharp edges, just the sound of time, slow, cold, patient, like the wind moving across snow, like memory itself breathing under ice. This is Just About Earth. And tonight, we'll listen to the echoes of a frozen age, to the fading footsteps of giants who once called this world their own. Because sometimes, to understand who we are, you have to step into the silence of who came before. Why did the giants of the Ice Age disappear? If you sit quietly long enough, this question starts to feel heavier than it sounds. It's not just about animals, it's about endings, about the way entire worlds can vanish so gently that no one living even notices the last heartbeat. The Ice Age was full of giants, not just in size, but in presence. They were built for a planet that demanded strength, endurance, patience. Every bone, every muscle, every strand of fur told a story of adaptation to cold, to hunger, to endless winter. And yet, when the Earth began to warm, they were the first to go. Why? That's the question that lingers in the cold air of museums, in the glass cases that hold their bones. It's the question scientists have turned over for more than a century, a puzzle scattered across frozen soil and ancient DNA. But it's also the kind of question that can't be answered by data alone, because extinction is never just about biology. It's about chance. It's about timing. It's about the fragile conversation between life and the planet that hosts it. Imagine the Earth as a living rhythm, glaciers breathing in and out, oceans expanding and retreating, climates pulsing like a heartbeat. For 2 million years, that rhythm favored the giants. The cold was their kingdom. Grasslands stretched wide, perfect for grazing. Predators grew in response, faster, stronger, hungrier. Everything existed in balance, brutal but precise. Then, one small tilt in the planet's orbit changed everything. The ice began to melt. It didn't happen overnight, not even over a single lifetime, but slowly, quietly, the balance shifted. The grasslands shrank. The forests crept north. The rivers swelled with meltwater, carving new paths. And with each season, the world that had made giants possible began to dissolve. To a mammoth, time moved differently. A century was just a few generations. They couldn't feel the climate changing the way we can read it in graphs. To them, it was just another long winter, followed by another short summer. But beneath their feet, the rules were changing: soil, vegetation, temperature, all whispering a different language. And evolution, that patient sculptor, doesn't work fast enough to rewrite an entire body. Still, climate alone doesn't explain everything. The Earth has warmed and cooled many times before, and life always found a way. So why not this time? Why did so many species vanish all at once? Mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, cave bears, woolly rhinos, while smaller creatures like foxes and hares survived. That's where we enter the story. Because around the same time the ice began to thaw, another creature appeared, small, upright, clever, armed not with claws or tusks, but with something far more dangerous: imagination. Us. When humans arrived in the frozen north, they didn't just adapt to the cold, they outsmarted it. They learned to make fire, to stitch clothing from hide, to build shelters that trapped warmth. They carried tools of stone, then of bone, and eventually of will. To the mammoth, we must have seemed like ghosts, fragile, hairless things that hunted with invisible weapons. And yet, somehow, we kept winning. Archaeologists have found the evidence: spear points lodged in mammoth ribs, butcher marks on bones, hearths surrounded by tusks. Somewhere between survival and curiosity, humanity learned to take down the unthinkable. And once that door opened, it didn't close. But still, was it really us? Could a handful of scattered hunter-gatherers have wiped out entire continents of giants? Some say no, the world was too vast, the populations too large. Others say we didn't need to kill them all, just to tip the balance. A few hundred mammoths here, a few thousand bison there. When food chains are that tightly wound, a single thread unraveling can pull the whole pattern apart. There's another theory, quieter, but maybe truer, that it wasn't one thing at all. Not the ice, not the humans, but both, colliding. A world already weakened by change met a new predator that didn't play by nature's old rules. Together, they created a storm too perfect to survive. When scientists look at the timing, they see a haunting overlap. As humans spread to each continent, the giants disappeared almost in rhythm. First in Australia, then Europe, then the Americas. It's as if we carried a quiet shadow with us, the end of an age that had lasted too long. But maybe disappeared isn't the right word. Maybe they didn't vanish, maybe they were replaced. The Ice Age didn't just end, it evolved. The mammoths became elephants. The saber-toothed cats left their echo in lions. Even the woolly rhino's spirit lived on in smaller, quicker forms. The giants didn't fail, they transformed. They shrank, adapted, yielded to a world that rewarded the nimble over the massive. Still, the question stays: why them and not us? What made one species fade while another rose? Maybe it was consciousness, that strange, double-edged gift that lets us imagine futures and mistakes at the same time. Maybe the giants were too much a part of the world to see its changes, while we were just separate enough to survive them. And maybe deep down that's what makes this story so haunting. Because when we ask why the giants disappeared, we're really asking whether the same thing could happen to us. Every civilization, every species that thought it had mastered its world has eventually met a boundary. The Ice Age was one of those boundaries, drawn not in stone, but in temperature, in time, in silence. Sometimes extinction is the planet's way of resetting the balance. Sometimes it's evolution's quiet reminder that nothing is permanent, not even dominance. The mammoths once ruled the plains as confidently as we rule the cities. But the earth doesn't keep rulers. It keeps rhythms. So maybe the real question isn't, why did the giants disappear? Maybe it's, what happens when the world no longer fits the shape of its inhabitants? When the temperature rises, when the food changes, when the sky forgets the names it used to carry, what survives is not the strongest, but the most adaptable. That's a lesson the earth has been whispering for eons. And somewhere, under layers of snow and silence, the bones of those giants still lie waiting, patient, part of the deep memory of the planet. Their story isn't finished, it's just paused. Because every time we melt a glacier, or dig a tusk from permafrost, or run our fingers over the grooves of ancient ivory, we wake them a little. We remind the earth that we remember. So tonight, as you breathe and listen, imagine this. The wind outside your window is the same wind that brushed against mammoth fur. The stars above your roof once glinted off their eyes. The world has changed its skin, but not its memory. And when we ask this question, why did they disappear? We're not talking to the past. We're talking to the Earth itself, to a planet that has seen rise and fall, warmth and frost, giants and ghosts. And every time it has begun again. So let's listen closely, because the answer isn't just buried in ice. It's written in us. We're the children of survivors, the descendants of those who walked among giants. And in our pulse, somewhere between heartbeat and breath, the Earth still remembers the sound of their steps. If you're still awake, take a slow breath with me. In and out. That's good. You've just synchronized, in a quiet, invisible way, with the planet itself. Every breath you take is a trade carbon for oxygen, warmth for calm. It's the same exchange the mammoths once made, the same breath that passed through the lungs of wolves, through the frost-covered trees of the Ice Age. Wherever you are, maybe curled under a blanket, maybe traveling somewhere through the night, this moment connects you to all of that. The cold plains are gone, but their rhythm is still here, tucked inside the slow pulse of the Earth. And you're part of it. The giants might have vanished, but the world that made them hasn't stopped breathing. It just changed its shape. When you exhale right now, a part of that air will drift into a cloud, fall as snow somewhere far north. And perhaps, if the Earth is kind, freeze again into ice that won't melt for 1,000 years. That's how close you are to eternity. That's how easily we forget that we're made of the same cycles we talk about. Now, if you've been listening for a while, you've probably noticed the way your mind begins to slow. That's the whole point of these journeys, not to rush toward answers, but to travel inward, slowly, until the noise of the day fades away. What we do here isn't science class. It's more like a quiet conversation between you and time. You, lying in the present, and the Earth, whispering from millions of years ago. So, where in the world are you listening from? Is it night or morning where you are? Is your room warm? Or can you hear rain tapping at the window? Somewhere, someone else is listening too, maybe on the other side of the planet, maybe in a cabin in the snow, maybe under a sky so different from yours that the stars look like new constellations. And yet, we're all here, sharing this same breath, this same hour, this same quiet question. It's strange, isn't it? That in all the chaos of the modern world, messages, screens, noise, we can still find a way to sit quietly together and wonder about something so ancient. There's something healing in that. To remember that curiosity doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just needs space. You might even notice your heartbeat slowing as you listen. The body does that when it realizes it's safe, when it recognizes calm not as silence, but as balance. And that's what this space is for, to find balance again, even if just for a few minutes. Now, I want you to imagine that you're standing in a field at dusk. The light is fading, and the air is cool. The sound of insects is soft, like static. Somewhere in the distance, a stream is murmuring under thin ice. You take a step, and the ground gives a little, not snow, not soil, something in between. That faint crunch beneath your feet is the sound of old seasons folding into new ones. Every time you move, you stir the memory of something that once lived here. Maybe that's what this story is really about, memory. Not just of the mammoths or the saber-toothed cats, but of the planet itself remembering how to change. Change hurts. It always has. For the giants, it meant extinction. For us, it means adaptation, learning, unlearning, trying again. The only difference is speed. The Earth moves slowly. We move fast, sometimes too fast. And yet, somehow, we keep finding our way back to these stories, to the Ice Age, to the lost megafauna, to the mystery of how a world can transform and still remain beautiful. Maybe that's our version of survival, remembering. Maybe remembering is our way of keeping the giants alive. If you're enjoying this slow walk through time, if these stories help you sleep or simply make the world feel a little wider before you close your eyes, it would mean a lot if you helped this little corner of calm continue. A simple like, a quiet subscription, a way of saying, yes, I'm here too. It helps more than you know, because somewhere out there, someone else might be looking for this same kind of quiet. I don't want this to feel like a request. Think of it more as a ripple, one that moves outward, gently. Every person who pauses here adds another voice to the echo of calm we're building. It's the digital version of a campfire in the Ice Age, small, glowing, surrounded by darkness, but somehow enough to keep the night from feeling endless. If you close your eyes, you can almost see it, a circle of light, surrounded by snow. You, sitting near it, listening to the soft hiss of burning wood. Somewhere beyond the firelight, the silhouettes of mammoths move like ghosts. Their shadows stretch and flicker across the white. And even though you know they're long gone, for a heartbeat, they feel close as if they never really left. That's what these stories do. They bridge the impossible. They let us visit times we can't touch, worlds we can't see, creatures we'll never meet, and still, somehow, they remind us that we belong to the same story. A story written not in ink, but in snow, in wind, in bone. So before we go deeper, just take another moment. Feel the air on your skin, wherever you are. That air is ancient, older than the pyramids, older than fire, older even than language. It has passed through forests that no longer exist, through lungs that turned to dust long ago, through clouds that froze and fell and rose again. Every breath is a reunion, every heartbeat a small act of memory. And while you listen, let the modern world fade a little, the notifications, the bright screens, the noise of things demanding to be urgent. They'll all be there when you wake up. But for now, there's only the rhythm of the story, only the hush of distant snow, only the question waiting patiently in the dark. What does it mean for a giant to vanish? And what does it mean for the world that follows? You don't have to answer. Not yet. Just listen. Because sometimes the answers don't come in words. They come in the way your body relaxes, in the way your thoughts slow down, in the small moment when you realize that you, too, are part of the same rhythm that has carried every creature that ever lived. You, the mammoth, the bird, the seed, the snowflake, all made from the same dust, all returning to it someday. So let's keep walking slowly, gently, without hurry. We'll go back into that frozen world together, step by step. We'll follow the warmth that ended it, the hands that hunted it, the sky that watched it fade. And maybe, along the way, we'll find something else, a reflection of ourselves, in the eyes of creatures long gone. For now, breathe. Let the sound of this story become the background hum of your thoughts. And if you start to drift, that's okay. That's part of the journey. After all, this isn't just a documentary. It's a lullaby for the planet. Time is a strange thing. It feels constant when we count it in minutes or days. But when you stretch it far enough, when you step outside the narrow rhythm of human years, it starts to behave differently, slower, heavier, almost alive. That's the kind of time the Earth keeps. Not the ticking of clocks, but the slow pulse of glaciers, the exhale of continents, the heartbeat of entire ages. The Ice Age, or rather, the Ice Ages, plural, were part of that deeper rhythm. The planet didn't simply enter a cold phase and then leave it behind. It drifted in and out of them like a tide, every pulse lasting tens of thousands of years. Each cycle began with a whisper, a subtle change in sunlight, in orbit, in tilt, so small you could live an entire lifetime and never notice it. But the Earth noticed. The oceans cooled, snow stopped melting, and what should have been one winter became 1,000. Imagine the scale of that transformation. An entire continent, layer by layer, disappearing under ice 2 miles thick. Cities, mountains, rivers gone beneath white silence. If you could stand at the edge of one of those ancient glaciers, it wouldn't look like ice the way we know it. It would look like a frozen sky that had fallen to the ground blue, immense, and moving slower than thought. The scientists call this rhythm the Milankovitch cycle, named after a man who looked at the heavens and realized that the Earth's dance around the sun is not perfect. Its orbit stretches and tightens over time. Its axis tilts and wobbles like a slow pendulum. Together, these tiny shifts decide how much sunlight reaches the poles. And over thousands of years, that difference, just a few degrees here or there, is enough to bury half the world in ice. It's humbling, isn't it? that the same warmth we take for granted today once disappeared, not through catastrophe or punishment, but through math, the quiet precision of cosmic geometry. The planet breathes, and its breath is measured in millennia. During the peak of the last ice age, around 20,000 years ago, the world we know was unrecognizable. North America was smothered beneath the Laurentide ice sheet, a frozen empire stretching from what is now New York to Alaska. Europe lay beneath another, the Fennoscandian sheet, a dome of blue-white that reached higher than mountains. Even the oceans had shrunk, their water locked away in frozen vaults. Sea levels dropped more than 100 meters, revealing bridges of land between continents, highways for animals and people who didn't yet know what continents were. If you could have stood on that land bridge between Siberia and Alaska, the place we now call Beringia, you might have seen herds moving like rivers. Steppe bison, woolly mammoths, reindeer, musk oxen, horses built for endurance more than speed. The air would have been sharp and dry, filled with the low hum of wind and the deep groan of distant ice. No birdsong, no trees, just tundra, stretching past the horizon, and yet it was alive. Even in that brutal landscape, life found rhythm. Grasses pushed through frozen soil, surviving on sunlight that barely reached the ground. Wolves and lions adapted to hunt across plains of snow. Humans, small but determined, learned to make fire not for comfort but for survival. In the middle of so much silence, life refused to give up. That's the paradox of deep time. The slower it moves, the more you notice the persistence of things. The glacier doesn't rush, but it reshapes entire worlds. The ocean doesn't shout, but it carries the memory of every storm. Even mountains, which look eternal, rise and fall like waves when measured in millions of years. If you've ever seen the lines on a cliff face, layers of stone stacked like pages you've seen time recorded in rock. Each layer is a season, a century, a memory. The earth doesn't forget. It just folds its memories until they look like mountains. Now, think of our species in that context. We've been here for only a blink, a few tens of thousands of years at most. If the history of the planet were a single day, humanity's entire story would take place in the last second before midnight. And yet, in that second, we've changed more than any other species before us. We've melted glaciers that took millennia to form. We've altered the air itself. We've become a new kind of force, faster than geology, louder than time. But during the Ice Age, none of that had happened yet. The world was still in balance, fragile, harsh, but balanced. When the temperature shifted, life shifted with it. When the ice advanced, animals followed the grass south. When it retreated, they followed it back north. For 2 million years, that dance continued: advance, retreat, repeat, until one day the rhythm broke. And when it did, the giants began to fade. To understand why, you have to think in Earth's language: slow, cyclical, patient. The Ice Age wasn't just cold, it was an architect. It carved valleys, sculpted lakes, spread minerals across continents. It made soil fertile by grinding mountains into dust. The very land that would one day feed human civilizations was built by ice. Even the rivers that now divide nations began as meltwater from glaciers long vanished. Every part of your world, from the hills outside your city to the salt in your tears, has been touched by that cold. The calcium in your bones was once trapped in shells that sank to the bottom of Ice Age seas. The air in your lungs contains atoms that froze and thawed through thousands of winters. To live on Earth is to live inside its memory. Deep time doesn't move in straight lines. It loops, folds, pauses. What we call the end of the Ice Age was just another turning of that slow wheel. The warmth that returned wasn't new, it was familiar, an echo of earlier interglacials that had come and gone long before humans were watching. But this one was different, because this time, something conscious was here to witness it. Us. And so, for the first time, the planet's rhythm met awareness. The glaciers melted, and humans watched. The mammoths died, and humans remembered. That act, remembering, changed everything, because the Earth had been changing forever, but now one of its children had learned to ask why. When you look at a map today, When you trace the coastlines or see where mountains rise, you're not just looking at geography. You're looking at time frozen in motion, the fingerprint of an age when the world breathed ice. And even though that age has passed, its presence still lingers. In the fossils buried deep below Siberia, in the grooves carved into bedrock by glaciers long gone, in the freshwater lakes that once were valleys, and in the quiet awe that still fills us when we see snow falling, even for a moment, as if some ancient part of us still remembers when the whole planet looked like that. That's the beauty of deep time. It doesn't ask you to understand. It asks you to slow down, to listen, because every gust of wind, every drop of rain, every stone beneath your feet is older than story, older than language, older than sleep itself. And when you realize that when you finally feel the weight of it, the world stops being just a place you live in, it becomes a companion, a teacher, a presence. So, tonight, as you drift through this story, remember, you are not separate from the Ice Age. Its cold built your oceans. Its glaciers shaped your world. Its silence carved a home for your species. The giants may be gone, but their breath still cools the wind that slips through your window. And maybe, in some slow, invisible way, the planet still dreams of them, the age of white light and thunderous steps, when time itself was cold and alive. The Ice Age didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't a punishment or a sudden twist of fate. It was, in its own quiet way, the planet doing what it has always done, adjusting, breathing, balancing the equation of life and sunlight. To understand it, you have to stop thinking of Earth as a rock that things happen on, and start seeing it as a system that things happen through. Everything about the Ice Age begins with one question: how much sunlight does the Earth keep, and how much does it let go? The planet is like a heartbeat caught between fire and shadow. Too much energy from the sun, and the seas rise, the air thickens, and everything burns. Too little, and the world turns white, and life slows to a whisper. Somewhere between those two extremes lies what scientists call climate equilibrium, the narrow band of temperature that keeps oceans liquid, clouds moving, and lungs breathing. But equilibrium isn't a constant. It wobbles. It drifts. And when it drifts too far, the world freezes. It starts with geometry. Every 100,000 years or so, the Earth's orbit around the Sun stretches and relaxes, a cycle known as eccentricity. At times, the orbit is nearly circular, keeping sunlight evenly distributed. At others, it becomes slightly elongated, meaning one part of the year receives a little less warmth. The change is tiny, barely a few percent, but when multiplied across the vastness of oceans and atmosphere, that small difference becomes monumental. Then comes obliquity, the tilt of the Earth's axis. Right now, it sits at about 23.5 degrees, which gives us our seasons. But that tilt also shifts slowly, swaying between about 22 and 25 degrees over a 41,000-year rhythm. When the tilt is greater, summers become warmer, winters colder, the extremes sharpen. When it's smaller, the seasons soften, and ice can build up year after year, refusing to melt. Finally, there's precession, a gentle wobble like a spinning top losing speed. It changes the timing of the seasons, relative to where the Earth is closest or farthest from the Sunday. Sometimes, that means the northern hemisphere tilts toward the sun when it's farthest away, cooler summers, longer winters. Stack those patterns together, eccentricity, tilt, wobble, and you have a planetary clock that sets the rhythm of ice and thaw. This is the machinery of deep time, invisible but exact. But orbital mechanics alone weren't enough. They were just the first domino. Once the planet began to cool, feedback loops took over. Ice, after all, is the perfect mirror. It reflects sunlight back into space, lowering temperatures even more. As the polar caps spread, the oceans contracted, exposing new land that reflected even more light. Less warmth reached the surface, and the air dried. Dust and ice covered continents like pages closing in a book. At the same time, something else was happening, a quiet rearrangement of breath. Carbon dioxide, the gas that traps warmth, began to fall. The colder the oceans became, the more CO2 they absorbed. Plants, slowed by frost, released less of it. Volcanoes, smothered under thick layers of ice, erupted less often. And so the planet's thermostat turned itself down, degree by degree, until winter wasn't a season anymore, it was a state of being. For millions of years, this balance held. The Earth didn't freeze entirely. It never does. But vast regions became locked in permafrost, and glaciers advanced like armies across the continents. The last ice age, the one that carved the world we know, began roughly 2.6 million years ago. It wasn't one unbroken sheet of ice. It came and went in pulses, long freezes separated by brief, warm breaths, called interglacials. We're living in one of those warm breaths right now. Everything we call civilization, every city, every story, every spark of electricity exists because the ice pulled back. Just enough. During the coldest phases, the planet's climate was a delicate machine. Temperatures in some regions dropped by more than 10 degrees Celsius compared to today. The air held less moisture, meaning deserts spread even as glaciers advanced. Oceans were smaller but stronger, their currents rerouted by ice walls and shifting winds. The jet streams danced differently, monsoons vanished, and entire ecosystems moved south as if fleeing from the sky. It's hard to imagine what that felt like, a world of silence and distance. If you'd lived then, the horizon itself would have looked different. Where Europe now has forests, there were grasslands stretching hundreds of kilometers. Where Canada now has cities, there was a mountain of ice taller than Everest. And where the English Channel lies today, mammoths and humans could walk from France to Britain. But the Ice Age wasn't just cold. It was precise. The planet wasn't dying. It was sculpting. The glaciers carved valleys, spread minerals, and churned soil into future farmland. When the ice melted, it left behind rivers that would feed the next age of life. If you could fast forward through those millennia, you'd see the continents breathing, swelling with frost, exhaling into rain. And through all of it, life adapted. Some creatures evolved thicker fur or slower metabolisms. Others grew smaller to survive on less food. The great mammals, mammoths, sloths, saber-toothed cats thrived because they were built for scarcity. They could endure cold, hunger, darkness. They were the masterpieces of an age that demanded resilience over grace. Humans, too, began to learn the rules of this frozen world. We built fire not just for warmth, but as a signal, a heartbeat of light against the endless dark. We learned to track the stars, to move with the seasons, to follow herds across the tundra, and unknowingly, we were aligning ourselves with the planet's own rhythm, just another species trying to find warmth in the breath of the earth. If you look closely, you'll notice that the Ice Age was never simply about cold. It was about balance, about feedback and fragility. It showed how interconnected everything is. Sunlight to orbit, orbit to ice, ice to carbon, carbon to life. Pull one thread, and the whole web trembles. That's why scientists study it so carefully now, because when they look back at that frozen world, they see reflections of our own, the same gases, the same loops, the same delicate thresholds. The only difference is speed. Back then, the planet shifted over millennia. Now, it shifts in decades. But the Ice Age reminds us that the Earth is resilient, not immortal. It can recover, but it can also erase. It has done both before. If you step outside tonight, look up at the moon. The light that touches your skin right now bounced off the same ice that glittered on mammoth tusks. The cold we imagine isn't gone, it's just waiting, asleep inside the cycles of the planet. And every snowflake that lands quietly on your window is a tiny message from that age, a reminder that the Earth's story isn't linear. It's circular. It's breathing. So when you hear about the Ice Age, don't picture a frozen death. Picture a patient world, teaching itself how to rest. Because sometimes, even planets need to sleep. When ancient people looked at the frozen world around them, they didn't see climate cycles. They saw gods, giants, and spirits moving through the land, beings too vast to name, too powerful to understand. Long before science, there was story. And the Ice Age, to those who lived in its shadow, was a story written in wind and bone. Every culture that touched the edge of ice imagined it as something alive. To the Norse, the world began not with warmth, but with frost. They called it Ginnungagap, the yawning void of ice and mist, where fire and cold met to create life. From the frozen rivers of that first realm, Ymir emerged a giant so immense that when he slept, new beings formed from his sweat. The gods would later kill him and build the world from his body. His flesh became the land, his blood the sea, his bones the mountains, and his skull the sky. The Norse didn't fear the cold. They saw it as the original architect. Cruel, yes, but creative. In Siberia, where the permafrost still keeps secrets, legends tell of earth elephants buried beneath the tundra, great beasts that lived underground, blind to the sun, and died instantly if exposed to air. When mammoth tusks began to surface from melting ground, people believed they were the remains of those hidden creatures, proof that the earth itself once breathed monsters. They didn't know it, but they were right. The ground was full of giants, only frozen, not mythical. Among the Inuit, stories spoke of Nanuk, the great master of bears, who ruled over all creatures of the north. The hunter who disrespected the balance of nature, who took too much, or killed for pride, would lose Nanuk's blessing and starve. In their world, survival wasn't domination, it was negotiation. The ice wasn't just weather, it was a being you could offend. It could close around you, whispering with snow until you vanished from sight. And in the Far East, in the mountains of China and Mongolia, the concept of the white dragon was born, a spirit of winter, coiled in clouds, whose breath could freeze rivers or awaken spring. Every storm, every frost, was seen as a sign of its movement through the sky. Even today, when you watch fog crawl across a valley, you can almost imagine the slow exhale of something ancient, unseen, and benevolent. In myth, cold was never just temperature, it was character. It tested humans, refined them, burned away the weak, and left only what could endure. That's why so many creation stories begin with winter, because in the beginning, the world must be still before it can live. The Ice Age left marks not just on land, but on imagination. The first art cave paintings, carvings, the earliest attempts to speak to eternity, all came from people who lived under the shadow of ice. The caves at Chauvet and Lascaux in France, Altamira in Spain, they're more than galleries. They're memories carved into stone when the world outside was unbearable. On those walls, mammoths and bison and lions move across torchlight, painted with pigments made from iron and ash. You can almost hear the breath of the artist, steady, focused, whispering to the dark. Those people didn't just record animals. They recorded reverence. Each figure was drawn with precision, as if copying a dream. To them, painting a creature wasn't representation, it was invocation. It meant calling it back. To paint was to pray for food, for survival, for connection. Every line said, "We see you, don't forget us." That relationship between humans and giants was never simple. They hunted them, yes, but they also honored them. To kill a mammoth was to face the divine, a creature big enough to feed a tribe, to clothe it, to shelter it. In Siberian burials, archaeologists have found tusks arranged like altars, skulls placed in circles, bones stacked as if in ritual. These were not trophies, they were offerings. Even at the dawn of reason, humanity knew instinctively, survival comes with gratitude. When later generations found those bones buried in ice, they didn't call them mammoths, that word didn't exist yet. They called them giants, titans, fallen angels, beasts of the flood. In medieval Europe, farmers who unearthed femurs, as long as their arms believed they belonged to biblical giants destroyed by divine wrath. And, in a way, that wasn't far from the truth. They were witnesses to an older flood, not of water, but of snow. The Ice Age became a mirror for human fear and wonder. To the early Greeks, who never saw glaciers but heard rumors from the north, the frozen lands were realms of monsters and gods, exiled from Olympus. Even Plato wrote about Atlantis sinking beneath waves, a memory, perhaps, of the sea rising at the end of the last glacial melt. Science would later call it deglaciation. The ancients called it the wrath of the sea, two names for the same awe. If you listen closely to the language of myths, you'll hear a pattern. Every culture remembered a great cold, a flood, or both. Those memories may not be literal, but they're not random either. They're echoes of real events, stretched and softened by centuries of retelling the glaciers retreating, the waters rising, the stars changing positions in the sky. Myth is what happens when the planet speaks, and humanity tries to answer in poetry. There's something deeply comforting in that even before we had science, we were paying attention. We looked at the world and said, this is not chaos. This is pattern. This is purpose. We didn't have words for feedback loops or orbital variation. We had gods, spirits, and giants. Different vocabulary, same reverence. The Ice Age, in that sense, was our first theology. It taught us humility. It showed us that survival required listening to the land, to the animals, to the weather. If you ignored the signs, you froze. If you respected them, you lived. That simple lesson, listen or perish, shaped every culture that came after. And maybe that's why the image of giants still lingers. Even now, we tell stories about beings bigger than ourselves, from Norse frost giants to modern movie monsters. They're not just entertainment. They're reflections of memory, the way we translate awe into narrative. Because deep down, we remember what it was like to live in a world ruled by creatures that made us feel small. And maybe part of us misses it, that sense of humility, before something vast and untamed. Next time you see snow falling, try to imagine it not as weather, but as language, the earth speaking in its oldest tongue. Every flake is a syllable from the age of giants. Every drift of white is a story repeating itself. Cold, silence, endurance, rebirth. And when you close your eyes tonight, if the world outside is quiet enough, you might even hear it, the low rumble of glaciers, the steady footsteps of something long gone but not forgotten. They're not myths anymore, they're memories written in ice. If you could walk through the Ice Age, it wouldn't feel like one world, it would feel like several stitched together. Each region, each ecosystem, had its own rhythm, its own champions. And for every vast plain or frozen forest, there was a creature that had mastered it completely until the balance shifted and mastery became a trap. When we talk about extinction, we often imagine a single moment, a loud, cinematic ending. But in truth, extinction is quiet. It creeps. It begins in whispers. One winter longer than usual, one river that doesn't thaw, one herd that doesn't return. And before anyone realizes, the rhythm has broken. The Ice Age's giants didn't fall all at once. They faded like echoes, each in their own way. Let's start with the most familiar, the woolly mammoth. If you close your eyes and try to picture the Ice Age, it's the mammoth that appears first. Massive, shaggy, patient, a monument made of muscle and fur, crowned with ivory spirals that could reach 4 meters long. They weren't just elephants with coats. They were engineers of the cold, able to travel hundreds of kilometers across tundra, digging through snow with their tusks to find grass buried beneath. Their herds shaped the land itself, trampling paths that became valleys, scattering seeds, fertilizing the soil with each slow migration. And yet, by the time humans began building cities, the mammoths were gone. The last ones didn't die in battle or freeze mid-step. They simply dwindled. The climate warmed, their grasslands turned to forest. The mammoths followed the cold northward and eventually found themselves trapped on islands, surrounded by rising seas. On a small Siberian island called Wrangel, a few hundred survived long after their cousins were gone. There, isolated from predators but cut off from the vast herds they once led, they grew smaller, weaker. DNA studies show that their genes began to decay, strange mutations, brittle bones, even altered scents that may have confused their own mating. The last of them likely took their final breath about 4,000 years ago, when the pyramids were already standing in Egypt. Imagine that, the world's great ice kings dying quietly, while humans built empires of sand. Then there was the saber-toothed cat, Smilodon fatalis. The name alone sounds like a warning. Its fangs could reach 20 centimeters, sharp as daggers. Its jaws weren't made for biting, but for stabbing. It hunted in bursts, ambushing giant bison and young mammoths, striking fast and vanishing into frost. For tens of thousands of years, it was perfection embodied muscle tuned to power, vision tuned to dusk. But perfection doesn't last in a changing world. When the Ice Age ended, its prey disappeared, the great herds gone with the cold. Smilodon could not adapt. It was too large, too specialized, and so the most efficient predator of its time became a victim of its own design. The fossils found in the La Brea tar pits of California tell the story best. Dozens of smilodons trapped while trying to feed on the bodies of animals already caught. Hunger made them reckless. The ground itself became their hunter. And what of the cave bear Ursus spelaeus, a creature taller than any man, heavier than a bison, whose bones fill European caves like forgotten furniture? Unlike modern bears, it was mostly vegetarian, feeding on roots and berries. But when the forests changed and plants withdrew, its food vanished. Some humans worshipped them, or at least respected them enough to bury their skulls. Caves in the Alps and Carpathians show arranged bones, as if early tribes saw the bear as a spirit of the mountain. When the cold ended, their caves filled with humans instead. The bear's disappearance wasn't war. It was replacement. The world simply ran out of room for two species seeking the same shelter. Then there were the lesser-known giants, the woolly rhinoceros, thick-skinned and horned like moving glaciers. They survived nearly to the end, wandering the steppe between Europe and Siberia. They were built for endurance, not escape, and that became their undoing. When the temperature rose sharply, the plants they relied on changed almost overnight. Their thick coats became liabilities. Their heavy bodies overheated in the new, humid summers. No predators were needed. They simply could not keep up with time. In North America, the giants fell one after another. Giant sloths that could stand taller than a human house. Short-faced bears that could outrun horses, camels, lions, and beavers the size of wolves, and standing among their fading shadows us. At first, humans were just another animal, fragile and few. But the moment we learned to use memory as a weapon, the rules changed. We could plan, coordinate, trap. We didn't need claws or speed, we had thought. Scientists debate how much of the extinctions were our fault. Some argue that hunting alone could never have wiped out millions of creatures across continents. Others show timelines where our arrival and their disappearance overlap too perfectly to be coincidence. In Australia, the megafauna vanished soon after humans appeared. Kangaroos, the size of cars, marsupial lions, giant wombats called diprotodon. In the Americas, it happened again. Everywhere we walked, the giants fell silent within centuries. Coincidence, perhaps, but history rarely repeats without reason. The most likely truth is a blend of both worlds, climate and consciousness. The Ice Age was ending anyway, but our presence accelerated its final act. We were the tipping point the ecosystem couldn't absorb. Each species we hunted weakened the next. Each fire we set changed the grass. Each shelter we built shifted the balance just a little. Until one day, the age of giants simply stopped. It's easy to read this story as tragedy, and it is, in part. But it's also transformation. The extinction of the megafauna made space for new species, new ecosystems, and ultimately, for us. Without that shift, there might never have been agriculture, cities, or history. We inherited the earth not through conquest, but through vacancy. We were small enough to slip through the cracks of time while the giants fell. And yet, their legacy remains in our awe, our myths, our bones. If you trace your DNA back far enough, you'll find echoes of their influence. Our ancestors learned from them how to survive cold, how to follow herds, how to use the land's rhythm as a guide. Their extinction was our education. Every tool we made, every story we told, was shaped in the shadow of creatures we could never truly understand. Even now, scientists can pull threads of that lost world from the ice strands of mammoth hair, cells of ancient bison, pollen from long-dead tundras. Under microscopes, those traces shimmer like ghosts. They tell us the end wasn't sudden. It was slow, complex, tragic, and perhaps inevitable. Extinction is not failure. It's part of the Earth's breathing. Species appear, rise, fade, and in fading, they make room for others. But still, there's something deeply human in our desire to mourn them. Maybe because, when we look at the bones of mammoths, we see our own reflection beings caught between power and fragility, forever chasing balance in a world that keeps changing the rules. And perhaps that's why the story of the Ice Age still feels unfinished. Because deep down, we know it isn't over. The same forces, temperature, hunger, curiosity still move within us. We are the new giants now, reshaping the planet faster than any glacier ever could. And if the Earth could speak, it might whisper what it whispered then, adapt or fade. There's a strange silence that follows the fall of giants. It isn't the silence of death, it's deeper than that. It's the silence of realization. The kind that makes you look at yourself and whisper, now what? When the mammoths vanished, when the saber-toothed cats stopped breathing, the Earth didn't pause. It kept spinning. The wind kept moving. The rivers kept running. But something invisible had shifted. A balance that had existed for millions of years was suddenly gone. And into that emptiness, we stepped. For the first time, humans were not just participants in nature. We were inheritors of it. The throne of the Ice Age, once shared by beasts too large to fear us, now belonged to something small, fragile, and endlessly curious. Us. But what does it mean to inherit a world that others died to give you? What does it mean to build a civilization on the bones of giants? If the mammoths taught us anything, it's that strength alone is not enough. They had endurance, muscle, and memory that stretched across continents, but they could not change fast enough. The world they were built for slipped away beneath their feet, and that, perhaps, is the first lesson of the Ice Age, that adaptation is more powerful than dominance. We humans often mistake intelligence for control. We imagine that to understand something is to own it. But the story of the Ice Age reminds us that the planet doesn't bend to understanding, it bends to rhythm, and rhythm doesn't ask for permission. It moves with or without us. When the giants disappeared, it wasn't punishment or tragedy in the moral sense. It was transition. The world was rearranging its pieces, testing new balances. And somehow, we tiny, upright creatures with fires in our hands were part of the experiment. The Ice Age ended, but something else began. Self-awareness. For the first time, a species looked around and realized it was alone in its category. We had outlasted the titans, but not because we were the strongest. We survived because we could imagine tomorrow. We could prepare, tell stories, teach our children what not to forget. And in doing so, we became the first species to truly carry memory forward, not just genetically, but deliberately. There's a kind of humility in that realization, and also a kind of danger. Because once you understand that you're the last of your kind standing, it's tempting to believe you were chosen. But nature doesn't choose. It balances. The Ice Age didn't select humanity as its successor out of favoritism. It simply made space, and we happened to fill it. The question is, what have we done with that space? Every tool we build, every city we raise, every light we ignite in the dark, all of it is possible because the giants are gone. We owe our world to their absence. And yet, in our rush to fill the silence they left behind, we've begun to repeat their story. We grow bigger, faster, more dominant, forgetting that the Earth always reclaims what grows too large. Maybe that's the second lesson. No creature, no civilization, can outrun its own environment forever. The mammoths thought the ice would last. We think the warmth will. But the truth is that stability is an illusion. The planet never stops changing. It only waits for us to notice. It's easy to see extinction as a past event, something that happened to them, not us. But look closer. Every species that's ever existed thought it had more time. The difference between them and us is that we can see it coming. We can measure our impact, trace our carbon, watch glaciers retreat in real time. And still we hesitate. Perhaps because, deep down, we recognize the same blindness that took the giants, the belief that the world is too vast to vanish beneath our feet. In a sense, the Ice Age never ended. The glaciers melted, yes, but the lesson remained frozen in the DNA of every creature that survived, adapt or disappear. It's a commandment written not in words, but in wind and water. The mammoth, the bear, the saber-tooth, they didn't fail. They fulfilled their purpose. They showed the earth what strength could do. And then they made way for something new, for thought, for reflection, for art. Without their fall, there would be no us. Without their silence, there would be no voice to tell this story. Sometimes I wonder if that's the secret thread tying evolution and philosophy together. Loss. Everything we are comes from something that no longer exists. Every breath you take, every spark of technology, every poem or song, all of it is built on extinction's quiet generosity. The planet creates by erasing. And maybe that's what it means to be alive, to exist in the space between what's been lost and what's still possible. We often think of evolution as a ladder, with humanity on top. But maybe it's a circle, one that keeps folding back on itself. We're not at the summit, we're just another moment in the loop. And someday, another species might study our bones, marvel at our cities buried in silt, and ask the same question we're asking now. Why did the giants disappear? There's humility in that image, but also beauty, because it means nothing is ever truly gone. Not the mammoths, not us, just transformed, just passed along to whatever comes next. If you listen closely to the rhythm of the modern world, the hum of cities, the buzz of wires, the slow breathing of engines, it's not so different from the Ice Age wind. The materials have changed, but the music is the same. Energy moving, life adapting, time folding. We are still part of the same experiment. We just forgot who started it. Perhaps that's what philosophy really is, the mind remembering that it was once an animal. Every question we ask about purpose, meaning, or destiny is, in a way, the echo of mammoth footsteps across frozen earth. We wonder why they vanished. But maybe the better question is, why are we still here? What are we meant to learn before our own rhythm breaks? The answer, if there is one, might be simple: awareness. To know that everything ends and still choose to care. To love a planet that has erased billions before us and still believe it's worth tending. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And maybe that's what the fall of the giants was always meant to teach. Because when you stand in a museum and look at the curved tusks of a creature that hasn't breathed in 10,000 years, what you're really seeing is a mirror. You see what time does to everything. Bones become fossils, names become whispers, and yet somehow the story remains. That's our inheritance. Not the earth itself, but the memory of it. So as you breathe now, quietly, somewhere between past and future, remember that you are part of a lineage that survived the impossible. That the warmth you feel on your skin tonight is the same warmth that melted the glaciers and made room for us. That your heartbeat is not separate from the rhythm of the planet, it's synchronized to it. The giants are gone, but they left us a question instead of an answer. And as long as we keep asking it gently, curiously, with gratitude, they are not truly extinct. They're alive in the wonder they left behind. If you close your eyes tonight and listen closely, really listen, not to the cars outside, not to the hum of your phone, but to that faint, low hum beneath everything, you might notice it. The sound of the earth still breathing after everything it has lost. And in that breath, there's an echo, the whisper of giants. We don't think of ourselves as living after an extinction. We imagine we were born into a stable world, as if the story began with us. But the truth is, we live in the afterglow of an age that ended only moments ago, geologically speaking. 10,000 years is nothing to the planet. A sigh, a blink, a pause between beats. The last mammoths died when humans were already carving symbols, already dreaming in language. Their hair still smelled of tundra while we were learning to grow crops. Somewhere, a hunter who had seen one with his own eyes might have sat by a fire, telling a child, once the world was full of shadows that moved, and now that child's descendants, us, walk under electric lights and call it progress. But sometimes, in quiet moments, the old memory returns. It lives in our stories of dragons, in our fascination with monsters, in our awe before anything enormous. Part of us still remembers what it felt like to be small, That memory hides in strange places, in how we stand before mountains, how we freeze before whales, how we whisper in cathedrals, even when no one tells us to be quiet. It's instinct. It's ancient. It's the body remembering that once there were things too vast to challenge, and that respect was another word for survival. Maybe that's why so many people feel uneasy when they see footage of glaciers breaking or forests falling. We don't just fear loss, we recognize it. It's the same rhythm repeating, the same silence returning. The giants are gone, but the pattern isn't. This time, we're the ones filling their role. What does it mean to live after giants? It means living in a world that feels smaller, more manageable, but also lonelier. There's no mammoth to share the horizon with, no roar echoing through the valley. Our world is filled with buildings instead, but even skyscrapers feel empty in comparison. They reach upward, but they don't breathe. Sometimes I wonder if that's why we dream of bigger things, of space, of other planets, of new frontiers. Maybe we're trying to replace the sense of vastness we once had naturally. The Ice Age gave us scale. Modern life took it away. Now we build rockets just to feel small again. But there's another kind of connection we forget, the quiet, living one. The same soil that buried mammoths now feeds our crops. The same rivers that carved ice canyons now run through our cities. Every mouthful of air you breathe tonight has been breathed before by something ancient, something enormous. You're not separate from them. You're the continuation. When I was a child, I once saw a reconstruction of a woolly mammoth in a museum, a full-size replica, its eyes made of glass, its fur brushed to a soft shimmer under dim yellow lights. I remember standing beneath it, barely reaching its knee, and feeling both awe and grief, without knowing why. It wasn't fear, it was recognition, as if some part of me, some buried memory from the species, still remembered standing near such creatures for real. It felt familiar, like meeting a dream you forgot you had. I think we all carry that somewhere, that quiet awareness that we are not the first, that we are walking through a world full of absences. Every landscape holds ghosts. Mountains used to be seafloors. Forests used to be deserts. Every gust of wind is passing through layers of history too vast to measure. And still, we breathe it in, unaware, every day. When the last ice melted, and the world began to green again, humans must have felt both relief and loss. The cold that once threatened them was gone, but so were the creatures that had defined their lives. Their gods, their hunts, their fears all evaporated with the snow. They stepped into a new world that was easier to live in, but harder to revere. Maybe that's when we began to forget how to listen to the earth. You see, living after giants means inheriting both their power and their absence. We learned to survive without them, but also to forget them. And forgetting is dangerous, because it severs the link between gratitude and existence. The mammoth never questioned its place in the ecosystem. We do, and in that questioning we sometimes lose balance. But remembrance, even quiet, uncertain remembrance, restores something. When we tell these stories, we're not just talking about fossils, we're talking about continuity. We're saying, you were here, we remember you, we are still learning from you. That's what makes humanity different. We don't just adapt, we reflect. We build meaning out of memory. Every winter, when snow falls and the world slows down, we recreate a little piece of that old rhythm. We light fires, we gather, we retreat into warmth, all ancient instincts, unchanged for tens of thousands of years. Even the act of watching snow, quietly, through a window, is a kind of inheritance. The Ice Age shaped our emotions as much as it shaped the land. Perhaps that's why silence feels comforting to some of us. It's familiar. It's the echo of the long, cold nights when survival depended on stillness. Noise was danger, quiet was safety. And maybe that's why, in the modern world, we still seek silence not as absence, but as return. To live after giants, then, is to live in the wake of awe. To walk through a smaller, faster, louder world, and still carry the shadow of immensity inside us. We no longer have mammoths outside our caves, but we have the memory of them inside our minds. And sometimes, that's enough to make us pause to look up at a mountain or an iceberg or even a storm cloud and whisper, I remember you. Because we do. Even if we don't say it out loud, our species remembers. The way we draw heroes, the way we dream of monsters, the way we stare into the ocean, all of it is shaped by the memory of being small in a world of giants. It's a longing that never left us. So, as you listen tonight, breathing softly in the dim light of your own age, know this: you are not late to the story. You are part of it. The Ice Age didn't end, it transformed. The mammoths didn't vanish, they changed form. Their bones became the soil, their warmth became ours, their story became your heartbeat. We live in their future, and one day, someone else will live in ours. Maybe they'll dig through ruins of our cities and find glass and steel the way we find tusks and bones. Maybe they'll stand before the skeleton of a whale or a plane or a skyscraper and feel the same mix of awe and sadness. And maybe, just maybe, they'll whisper the same thing we whisper now. They were here once, and the world remembers. So rest, if you can. Let that thought settle. You are living proof that the giants weren't lost in vain. Every breath you take is a continuation of their story. And maybe that's all any of us can hope for, not to last forever, but to echo kindly in what comes after. When we tell the story of the Ice Age giants, it's easy to cast ourselves as the villains, the fragile humans who arrived with fire and cunning, bringing the quiet end of creatures that had ruled for millennia. It's a tidy story, dramatic, moral, almost cinematic. But the truth, as always, is messier. The question isn't just, did humans cause the extinctions? It's, could the world have changed without us anyway? Because long before we made our first spear, extinction had been the planet's oldest rhythm. Species rise, adapt, vanish, and give space for the next. In that sense, what happened to the mammoth or the saber-toothed cat wasn't a new tragedy, it was another verse in an ancient song. Still, something about their disappearance feels different. The timing lines up too well. Wherever humans arrived, within centuries the megafauna were gone. In Australia, within a few thousand years of our arrival, the enormous kangaroos and marsupial lions vanished. In North America, the same pattern repeated: mammoths, mastodons, ground sloths, all gone not long after humans crossed from Siberia. Coincidence? Or consequence? Scientists have wrestled with that question for decades, and the evidence, frustratingly, points in both directions. Let's start with the argument for human responsibility, the so-called overkill hypothesis. It began with a simple observation. Humans, even in small numbers, are extraordinarily efficient hunters. Unlike other predators, we strategize. We cooperate. We plan traps, ambushes, fires, and drives. And we don't just kill for food. We kill for survival, for bone, for hide, for warmth, for safety. In the late Ice Age, that skill would have given us immense power over creatures that had never faced coordinated hunters before. Archaeological evidence supports it. At sites across Siberia, Alaska, and Europe, we've found mammoth bones split with stone tools, rib cages pierced by flint blades, caches of ivory shaped into spears. In North America, a single kill site might contain the remains of dozens of mammoths, evidence of organized hunting or even early forms of mass trapping. The pattern is compelling. The giants vanish just after humans appear. It's not proof, but it's rhythm, and nature rarely repeats coincidence so precisely. Yet, not everyone agrees. Some researchers point out that the climate at the end of the Pleistocene was changing faster than at any time in hundreds of thousands of years. Temperatures rose, sea levels surged, rainfall patterns collapsed. Grasslands, the open plains that sustained giant grazers, turned into forests almost overnight, geologically speaking. The plants they ate vanished, the ice retreated, new diseases emerged. For creatures built for cold, that was fatal. Even without us, they might not have survived. There's also the question of scale. Could a few scattered bands of humans, numbering only in the tens of thousands, really wipe out millions of animals across continents? It seems almost impossible. Their weapons were primitive, their range limited, their travel slow. To some scientists, blaming them for mass extinction feels like giving them too much credit or too much guilt. And yet, small forces can tip large systems. A single spark can start a wildfire. A single change in migration can empty a landscape. Humans didn't need to kill every mammoth. They only had to disrupt the rhythm. Take the oldest, the strongest, the leaders of the herds, the rest would follow into collapse. Ecology is not linear. It's fragile, fractal, and easily unbalanced. There's another argument, more subtle. Humans didn't just hunt, they changed landscapes. Even before agriculture, fire was our oldest tool. We used it to clear brush, to drive animals, to keep predators away. But every flame alters an ecosystem. Grasslands turn to ash, forests to open plains, rivers to smoke-choked trickles. To us, fire was survival. To the megafauna, it was displacement. Imagine a world where the cold was retreating, forests spreading, and then small creatures began lighting the land itself on fire. To a mammoth, the planet must have felt like it was ending twice, once by warmth, once by flame. But then comes another perspective, one that gives us too little credit. It says that perhaps we humans were simply witnesses, not culprits, that the giants were already dying when we arrived, and we just happened to walk into their final chapter. After all, extinction leaves no witnesses, only fossils, and fossils don't tell intent. They don't whisper blame. They just lie there, patient, letting us argue over them thousands of years later. There's also the possibility that the story isn't about blame at all, but about inevitability. The Earth itself has always been the ultimate predator. It devours and remakes its children constantly through volcanoes, droughts, ice, and fire. We are not outside of that process. We are part of it. And perhaps the disappearance of the giants was not our crime, but our inheritance, a reminder that every age has its ending, and every ending creates a beginning. But the conversation doesn't end there, because now, as we face our own environmental crises, the argument turns inward. If we were capable of altering entire ecosystems with fire and stone, what are we doing now with engines and cities? If a few thousand hunters could ripple extinction through continents, what can billions of industrial humans do to the climate itself? The question of the mammoths isn't really about the past anymore. It's about scale. It's about us realizing that we've always been powerful even when we were small. That's why the debate matters. Because how we tell the story changes how we see ourselves. If we were the villains, then guilt might drive us toward responsibility. If we were just witnesses, we might shrug and repeat history. But if we were participants, both creators and destroyers, then perhaps the truth is more complicated and more useful. It means we've always been woven into the planet's feedback loops, always part of the experiment. Maybe the mammoths weren't killed by humans or killed by climate. Maybe both were expressions of the same larger process. Earth testing the limits of adaptation, trying out new players in the endless game of survival. In that view, we're not separate from nature at all. We are the Ice Age, still unfolding in new forms. The glaciers melted, but the experiment continues. So, who's to blame? No one. Or everyone. It depends on how you look at time. If you measure in centuries, it looks like human fault. If you measure in millennia, it looks like planetary rhythm. Zoom out far enough, and the line between the two disappears entirely. Maybe that's the most important lesson, that guilt is too small a word for a process this vast. The extinction of the giants wasn't a moral failure, it was a reminder that life is temporary, ecosystems fragile, and change always the only constant. We didn't end the Ice Age, we just lived through its closing act. And maybe, someday, another species will do the same for us. They'll look at our fossils, our cities, our strange little artifacts, and ask the same question we ask of the mammoths. Was it them? Or was it just time? Close your eyes for a moment. Forget the hum of the present, no cars, no lights, no walls. Now imagine you are standing on Earth, not as it is, but as it was 20,000 years ago. The first thing you notice is the air. It's sharper than anything you've ever breathed, clean, metallic, filled with the faint scent of frozen minerals. Each breath feels alive, like glass turning to vapor in your lungs. When you exhale, the sound vanishes instantly, swallowed by the vastness of the cold. The horizon is endless. Everything around you, land, sky, and time, is the same pale color of quiet. White isn't even the right word. It's something deeper, a kind of luminous gray that erases the edges of distance. The sun hangs low, never warm, a coin trapped in a sea of thin blue air. Beneath your boots, or perhaps bare feet wrapped in fur, the ground is neither firm nor soft. It's ancient ice, layered with windblown snow and the footprints of beasts long gone. You can hear it creak under your weight, a deep sigh from the planet itself. Every step feels borrowed. In the distance, something moves. At first, it's only a shadow, slow and deliberate, too large to be wind, too steady to be illusion. Then, through the drifting snow, the form becomes clear, a mammoth. Not a picture in a museum, not a fossil, alive. Its fur catches the light, glimmering gold and brown beneath a thin veil of frost. Its tusks curve outward like crescent moons, each scar along their surface a record of storms survived. You feel the vibration of its footsteps through the ground before you hear them. A deep, rhythmic thud, like a slow heartbeat echoing through frozen soil. It passes within 30 meters of you. Its eye, dark, wide, and calm, meets yours for a brief second. There's no fear in it, only recognition. The same quiet curiosity that binds all living things. Then it turns, snorts a cloud of steam, and moves on, its massive shape dissolving into the fog of snow and distance. For a long while you just stand there, breath caught between disbelief and awe. This world isn't dead, it's sacred. Every sound, every silence, feels deliberate, as if the earth is holding its breath. Look closer. Around you, the frozen plains are dotted with life. Far to the left, a herd of bison trudges single file through powder, so deep their legs vanish beneath it. Their breath rises in white spirals that twist into the wind. To the right, two dire wolves pace along a ridge, their fur rippling like grey fire. They stop, sniff the air, and fade back into the drifts, ghosts of hunger moving on instinct. Above, the sky shifts, constantly clouds forming and unraveling, sunlight glancing off ice crystals in brief flashes of rainbow. You realize that even here, in a world ruled by frost, color survives. Faint blues in the shadows, soft gold where the sun touches snow, and when the wind catches just right, you can hear a sound like music, not from any instrument, but from the world itself. The glaciers sing, low, resonant tones carried through miles of ice, like the voice of time speaking in slow motion. The temperature drops further. You pull your fur tighter, though you're not sure it helps. Your eyelashes grow heavy with frost. Every movement feels slower, as if the cold is thickening time itself. This, you realize, is what eternity feels like, not endless duration, but endless stillness. Night comes quickly. There is no sunset, just a slow fading of blue into silver. The stars appear like cracks in the sky, impossibly bright, unmoving. There is no noise now except the sound of your own pulse, soft and deliberate in your ears. You light a small fire, just enough to paint a circle of amber around your body. Beyond it, the world remains untouched. You feel smaller than you ever have, but also more alive. The universe feels close, the earth immense, and you a flicker between them. You wonder how your ancestors endured this, how they hunted, loved, dreamed, and built stories in such a place. Maybe it was easier for them, because they didn't see the cold as an enemy. They saw it as a teacher. To live here, you had to move with the world, not against it. You had to listen to the snow, to feel the language of ice and silence. In the far distance, a crack splits the quiet, the sound of a glacier carving, a thunder that rolls slow and long, deeper than any drum. Somewhere, an iceberg has broken free, beginning a journey that will last thousands of years. It drifts toward an ocean that doesn't yet have a name. You close your eyes again, and in that sound, the thunder of ice, you hear the whole story of the planet. Creation and destruction, frozen and released, over and over, without judgment. Even here, where death feels permanent, life is quietly at work. Beneath the surface of the snow, bacteria and moss cling to stones. Under frozen lakes, fish drift lazily in slow motion, their hearts barely beating. Everything is alive, just slower than you're used to. When you open your eyes, the northern lights are rising. They shimmer across the horizon like curtains of green and violet fire, bending and rippling as if stirred by unseen hands. The light reflects off the glacier, off the tusks of the mammoth far away, off the snow at your feet. It feels like standing inside a dream painted by time itself. You breathe out, and the air crystallizes in front of you, a tiny cloud that will fall, melt, evaporate, and perhaps, one day, become part of another breath in another age. You realize how little separates you from everything else, how the same atoms inside you once belonged to mammoths, to ice, to stars. You're not just standing in the ice age, you're standing within its memory, carried forward by the same matter that never truly leaves, only rearranges. The wind softens. You lie back on the snow, eyes tracing the slow dance of aurora above you. The ground beneath you hums faintly, the heartbeat of glaciers shifting, miles deep. It's not frightening. It's comforting. For the first time, you feel that time itself isn't something passing. It's something holding you. And as you drift between waking and sleep, the world feels infinite again. The same cold that once seemed hostile now feels like an embrace, steady, patient, eternal. The giants are out there somewhere, moving under the same stars. The earth is dreaming, and you are part of its dream. If the earth could dream, it would dream in ice. Not because ice is still, but because it remembers. Every glacier is a diary. Every snowflake that fell and never melted became a sentence, pressed quietly into layers that deepened over millennia. When scientists drill ice cores from Antarctica or Greenland, they aren't just pulling up frozen water, they're lifting time itself. Tiny bubbles trapped inside those cores hold air that hasn't been breathed for hundreds of thousands of years. Oxygen, carbon dioxide, even traces of volcanic ash, all preserved, like breath inside crystal. Each layer whispers what the world was feeling at that moment. How warm, how alive, how restless. It's strange, isn't it, that the coldest places on Earth are also the most full of memory. Where warmth fades, memory lasts. Where movement stops, time begins to write. Ice doesn't forget. When a volcano erupts, its ash falls and becomes a dark stripe in the glacier's wall. When a forest burns, its smoke drifts and settles, frozen mid-air. When the planet sighs, the ice listens. It keeps everything, the triumphs, the mistakes, the moments we'd rather erase. Beneath the white silence of Antarctica lies an entire library of history, each page stacked perfectly on the last. A library no human built, yet one that records us more faithfully than any book. Sometimes, when I think of those ancient layers, I imagine the Earth as an old storyteller. She doesn't speak loudly. She doesn't need to. She whispers through density, through temperature, through trapped molecules of breath. And we, her curious children, are just beginning to learn how to listen. The first time a core was pulled from the ice, scientists expected data. What they didn't expect was emotion. Because looking at that frozen air, those tiny spheres of life from another time, you can't help but feel humbled. That bubble you're holding between your fingers might contain the breath of a mammoth, the exhale of a Neanderthal, or the smoke of a fire built to survive the endless dark. You realize then that the past isn't gone, it's compressed. And the ice, for all its stillness, is not dead. It moves slowly, but relentlessly. Each glacier creeps forward by millimeters a day, reshaping valleys, carving mountains, grinding rock into dust. It doesn't rush, because it doesn't need to. It knows that time belongs to it. In its patience lies power. That's why ice is such a perfect metaphor for memory. It teaches us that to remember is not to stay frozen, but to preserve meaning through motion. Every time a glacier moves, it carries the past along, folding it deeper into itself. Nothing is erased, only buried gently, waiting for discovery. If you ever find yourself standing before a glacier, notice the way it glows. Blue, Not white, the kind of blue that lives only where light has traveled through centuries of compression. That color is the weight of memory made visible. The more time the ice holds, the deeper the blue becomes. It's as if the earth paints its memories in shades of sorrow and serenity. And when it melts, those memories return to motion. The water flows into rivers, into oceans, into clouds. They rise again, fall again, and someday freeze again. Memory, it turns out, is just another form of circulation. Even what's forgotten is never truly lost, it only changes form. Maybe that's what we are, two moving memory. Our bodies made of ancient atoms, our blood carrying the same water that once filled Ice Age seas. The tears we shed tonight might have fallen once as rain on the back of a mammoth, then frozen, then melted, then found their way back to us. We are walking condensations of time, every breath recycled through billions of lives. It's a comforting thought that nothing, not even loss, is permanent. But ice also warns, because the same patience that preserves can also break. When warmth rises, when balance tips, the ice releases everything it's held, ancient air, trapped gases, forgotten histories. It exhales, and the planet listens again. That's what's happening now. The memory of the Earth is melting. We can read the pages faster than ever, but the library is dissolving as we read. And yet, there's something poetic in that, too. Because what use is memory if it's never shared? Perhaps the melting isn't destruction, but disclosure, the Earth remembering out loud. It's giving us its story, one last time, in the only language we can truly understand: change. If you think of ice as mind, then the oceans are thought flowing, connecting, restless. And when the two meet, something beautiful happens. The solid becomes liquid. The memory becomes dream. The same way our own thoughts melt when we finally let them go. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine the Earth asleep, dreaming of its own past. In that dream, glaciers are neurons, vast, luminous threads connecting epochs. The mammoth is still alive somewhere, grazing in the corridors of that dream. The saber-toothed cat prowls again, not in flesh, but in memory's motion. Even the sound of their footsteps lingers, resonating faintly beneath our cities, beneath the hum of our modern noise. We live on a planet that remembers everything: the storms, the fires, the first laughter of children, the last breath of the giants. All of it is stored, somewhere, in matter and motion. To walk on Earth is to walk on history. To drink from its rivers is to taste memory melted into being. When we speak of the Ice Age, we usually talk about cold, but maybe it wasn't cold at all, maybe it was clarity. A long, crystalline silence in which the world could think. And maybe, every winter, when frost creeps along our windows, the planet is trying to remind us how to pause, how to remember. So next time you see a snowflake melting on your skin, watch how quickly it disappears. That's memory in miniature beauty that lasts only long enough to be noticed. And yet, in its brief existence, it reflects everything: geometry, symmetry, time. It holds the pattern of the universe for a moment, then returns quietly to water. Perhaps we, too, are like that brief patterns in the long freeze of time, intricate and temporary, carrying the reflection of something infinite. And when we melt, when we vanish, maybe we, too, return to the ocean of memory, waiting to be remembered again. So sleep, if you can. Let your thoughts slow, like snow settling on still water. Let the day freeze and drift into quiet, because in silence, like in ice, meaning gathers. And somewhere beneath all that stillness, the Earth continues to remember patiently, completely, and forever. Imagine this, not a future of fire, but of frost. A quiet return, not an apocalypse. No explosion, no final warning. Just snow falling, endlessly, until the world begins to forget what warmth felt like. It starts subtly, like all great changes do. A winter that lingers longer than usual. The sea ice that refuses to melt in spring. Farmers who look at grey skies and whisper that the sun feels weaker this year. No one calls it the beginning. Not yet. Because endings never announce themselves, they arrive disguised as ordinary days. The air grows sharper. Summer becomes brief, hesitant, as if uncertain of its place. Birds migrate earlier. Rain turns to sleet. In northern cities, People joke about the old winters returning, unaware that history has a way of circling back. Then, one morning, the world wakes to silence. Snow has fallen all night heavy, slow, relentless. The streets are gone. The cars are buried. The sky is white from horizon to horizon. Even the sound of footsteps feels muffled, swallowed by the thickness of air. For a while, people find it beautiful. They take photographs. They make tea and watch the flakes drift past their windows. But then days become weeks, and the beauty turns into awe, and awe into unease, because the snow never stops. In the oceans, the currents begin to shift. The warm waters that once carried heat northward falter, blocked by expanding ice. Storms weaken, then vanish, replaced by long stillness. The wind changes tone, no longer fierce, just constant, like the exhale of something vast and patient reclaiming its breath. From space, the Earth starts to look familiar again. The continents wear crowns of white. The polar caps reach down like hands, touching what was once temperate. The line between winter and the rest of the year dissolves. The planet remembers. In this new age or old one, depending on how you see it, the cities become islands of memory. Skyscrapers poke through layers of snow like fossils of ambition. Glass cracks, concrete sighs, and forests of frost bloom across rooftops. The hum of electricity fades. The world returns to the older rhythm of light and dark, silence and breath. At first, humanity resists. We build walls, burn fuel, cling to the idea of warmth. But even the brightest fire is temporary when the sky itself has decided otherwise. The air thickens. Ice creeps across windows like veins. In some places, the snow buries entire towns, sealing them in time the way glaciers once sealed mammoths. We become what we used to find. And yet, it's not all tragedy. Somewhere far north, beneath auroras that shimmer over frozen oceans, small groups of people adapt. They live in domes built from what used to be greenhouses, recycling light from the weak Sunday. Their cities hum softly, powered by geothermal warmth deep beneath the ice. They walk across plains where once there were highways, guided by stars no longer blurred by smog. They speak in slower tones, because sound carries differently in the cold. They have learned patience again. One of them, maybe a child, looks out at the horizon endless, glittering, untouched, and whispers the same question our ancestors asked. Will it ever end? But perhaps that's the wrong question. Perhaps the better one is, was it ever gone? Because this world of frost isn't punishment, it's return. The earth has always cycled between warmth and silence. And now, after centuries of heat and haste, it's choosing to rest again. Imagine walking through that world. Snowflakes fall as large as feathers. They collect on your eyelashes, melt into your skin, and freeze again as the wind changes. The sound beneath your boots is soft, almost musical. Somewhere in the distance, a glacier moans not from pain, but from movement. It slides, inch by inch, reshaping valleys the way time reshapes memory. You stop at what used to be a coastline. Now, the ocean is frozen to the horizon, a smooth field of glass. Through the translucent surface, you can see slow shapes moving: fish, seals, things that adapted in silence. Even here, life has found a way to glow. Bioluminescent organisms swirl beneath the ice, tracing blue ribbons of light that pulse like veins through the darkness. At night, the sky is brighter than day. The auroras never stop. They ripple across the firmament like silk, green and violet and gold, bending around the curve of the earth. The stars are sharp, close enough to touch. The moon reflects on the ice so clearly that it feels like there are two of them, one above, one below, watching each other across infinity. Somewhere, buried deep in the permafrost, a shape begins to reappear: a mammoth, perfectly preserved, the color of honey beneath the frost. Its tusks curl upward, unbroken. Its fur glitters under the moonlight, and for a moment, it looks less like death and more like waiting, as if the planet has been keeping it safe, ready to wake it when the time is right. You kneel beside it, brushing away the snow. The air smells faintly of ancient grass. You wonder if it remembers if memory can sleep for millennia and still dream. Somewhere inside that frozen body, in the spirals of its DNA, lies the entire story of endurance. And now, as the cold deepens, the world seems ready to tell it again. Perhaps one day, long after we're gone, the new caretakers of Earth will find our cities the way we found mammoths, perfectly preserved, entombed in ice. They'll walk through glass towers filled with frozen air, see photographs on walls, papers turned to crystal, and wonder who we were. They'll study our fossils and argue about why we vanished. And one of them will whisper, maybe softly, "They lived during the warm age." The cycle will continue. The planet will breathe in again, and the frost, once more, will write its slow, patient poetry across the skin of the world. So if the ice returns, maybe it won't be the end at all. Maybe it will be a reminder that everything alive must eventually rest, that the earth, too, has dreams that require stillness, and that even in cold there is kindness. When you think of the future, don't fear the snow. It's not coming to erase us. It's coming to remember us, to fold our story into its layers alongside all the others, the mammoths, the forests, the seas. It will hold us there, quietly, until warmth comes again. And when that warmth finally arrives 1,000, 10,000 years from now, it will melt and flow and whisper our names back into the rivers. Our stories will travel again, through clouds and rain and breath. Nothing ends. It only cools and waits and begins again. Science begins with questions. Philosophy begins with the same ones, only slower. One seeks to measure, the other to mean. But sometimes, in the quiet, they meet not as opposites, but as reflections. The Ice Age is a perfect example of that meeting. On one hand, it is numbers and data, isotopes, carbon readings, sediment layers, orbital shifts. On the other, it is a mirror held to existence itself, asking, why does life persist through such cold? What does endurance mean when the world forgets warmth? Every piece of data we have about that frozen world tells a story both physical and spiritual. The glacier isn't just ice, it's patience made visible. The extinction of the mammoth isn't just an event, it's a lesson about limits. The rising temperature isn't just chemistry, it's consequence. Science tells us the Ice Age was driven by cycles, slow oscillations in the planet's orbit, tilt, and rotation. Philosophy looks at the same pattern and sees a parable about rhythm, that nothing living, not even a world, can remain still forever. That movement, even between extremes, is the essence of being. When we study the gases trapped in ancient ice, we call them records of climate. But think about what that really means. They are the planet's breath, stored for eternity. Each bubble of air is a sigh of the world, as it once was a single exhale frozen in time. And when scientists melt that ice in their laboratories, releasing air from 10,000 centuries ago, the Earth speaks again. The sound is imperceptible, but the meaning is profound. I remember. That's where science and wonder meet, at the edge of what can be measured and what must be felt. Because data alone can't explain why we feel awe when looking at a glacier, or sorrow when hearing of a species lost. Those feelings aren't flaws in reason, they're extensions of it. Emotion is how the mind acknowledges scale. It's how the soul recognizes time. The more we learn about the Ice Age, the more we realize how delicate life is. How every variable temperature, light, rainfall, oxygen must align perfectly for existence to unfold. To a scientist, this is equilibrium. To a philosopher, it is grace. Two words for the same phenomenon, the improbable balance between chaos and continuity. And when that balance tips, the world shifts, the glaciers advance, the herds move, the predators adapt, species vanish. Then warmth returns, new forests grow, new creatures emerge, and the cycle begins again. Nature has no tragedy, only transitions. But for humans, beings who remember and imagine change becomes story. We give it weight. We ask why. We mourn what disappears, even when disappearance is natural. That capacity for empathy, for grief beyond the self, might be the most remarkable adaptation of all. It means that evolution didn't just shape our hands or minds. It shaped our hearts. Think of this. When a scientist studies fossils, they're not just cataloging bones. They're engaging in dialogue with time. When they brush away dust from a mammoth tusk, they're performing an act of reverence as old as prayer. The difference between religion and research isn't as wide as we think. Both come from wonder. Both ask the same questions, only in different languages. And both, in their own ways, reach the same conclusion that life is rare, that time is vast, and that understanding is the closest thing to faith we have left. Science says the Ice Age ended because of orbital variations, greenhouse gases, and feedback loops. Philosophy says the Ice Age ended because no age lasts forever. And both are right, because truth, like ice, has layers. The deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes until it starts to look like reflection. Perhaps the most beautiful realization is this. The same forces that froze the world also made it livable again. The melting wasn't destruction, it was transformation. The floodwaters from retreating glaciers filled the rivers that would nourish civilizations. The crushed rock beneath the ice became fertile soil. Even extinction created space for new life to bloom. The planet writes its poetry in paradox. And maybe we do too. We mourn what we destroy, yet we create from that mourning art, knowledge, compassion. Our species carries both sides of the glacier, the cold precision of intellect and the warm current of emotion flowing beneath it. The tension between those forces is what makes us human. Sometimes, when scientists study the Ice Age, they describe its end as the last great warming. But that phrase feels incomplete. It wasn't just warming, it was awakening. The earth exhaled, the rivers ran, the forests returned. And in that moment, we appeared small, shivering, curious, staring into the sky that would one day carry our satellites and our dreams. We were born from thaw. The same warmth that ended the Ice Age gave birth to us. And now, as our own world warms again, not from cycles, but from consequence, we face a choice older than civilization. Will we remember what the ice taught? Will we honor the balance or break it again? It's tempting to think of ourselves as separate the observers, not the observed. But the truth is, we are data points in the same experiment. We are one more entry in the ice core, one more ripple in the sediment, one more breath in the planetary memory. The only difference is that we know it. And with knowledge comes responsibility. That's where philosophy returns, not to compete with science, but to complete it. Science can tell us how the earth changes. Philosophy asks why it matters. Science shows us what happens when equilibrium fails. Philosophy reminds us that we, too, can fail to see it. To study the Ice Age is to study ourselves, our fragility, our arrogance, our resilience. Every fossil, every molecule of air, every data chart is a mirror, quietly asking, what will you leave behind when the next layer forms? What story will the ice tell about you? The answer isn't fixed. It depends on whether we treat knowledge as weapon or wisdom. If we listen, if we slow down, if we let the numbers speak in whispers instead of alarms, we might find what the Ice Age always knew, that survival isn't conquest. It's cooperation. It's rhythm. It's remembering the dance between cold and heat, between knowing and feeling, between silence and sound. Because at the end of every calculation, at the edge of every chart, the earth waits patient, ancient, kind. It doesn't demand apology. It only asks for awareness, to see, to understand, to remember. That perhaps is the only faith worth having. So breathe slowly. Let the science and the stillness settle together. Let reason and reverence stop arguing for a moment, and listen to the same truth they've both been trying to tell you all along, that the world is not a problem to solve. It's a relationship to tend. And the Ice Age, cold, cruel, beautiful, was simply one of its ways of saying, I am still here. Are you listening? Take a slow breath, not a deep one, just enough to feel the air arrive. In and out. That's it. Now again. In and out. Each inhale, a small invitation. Each exhale, a quiet release. Like the tide, like the planet itself. You're listening to a story about ice and time, but what you might not have noticed is that your body has been mirroring it. Every time you breathe in, Your lungs expand a warm front moving across frozen land. Every time you breathe out, your body cools, contracts a glacier pulling back into silence. You are not separate from the world you're hearing about. You're a smaller version of its rhythm. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your face soften. You've been carrying expressions all day, thoughts, plans, names, lists, the noise of survival. But right now, none of that is required. You don't need to solve, fix, or hold anything. You only need to exist, just as the ice exists, quiet, steady, waiting for sunlight. If you can, imagine that you are lying on a frozen lake. It's not dangerous, not cold enough to hurt. It's safe, thick, solid beneath you. The surface glows faintly under a pale moon. When you breathe, the frost near your lips forms tiny halos, brief, delicate worlds of your own making. Beneath you, the ice hums. It moves slowly, expanding and settling with soft groans. That sound, deep, resonant, ancient, is the voice of the planet stretching in its sleep. You can almost feel its heartbeat through your back. Slow, patient, older than words. And if you listen carefully, you'll notice it matches yours. Thud, pauser, thud, pauser. Life speaking to life. The air here is so still that you can hear snowflakes landing. Each one arrives with a whisper, joins the others, and becomes part of something vast. You realize that's what you are, too, one breath, among billions, adding to the rhythm of a living earth. And for the first time all day, you don't need to do anything to belong. You already do. Now breathe again. In. Feel the cool air entering your nose. Out. Feel it warm as it leaves. That's your personal climate system, heat moving, adjusting, balancing the same laws that govern stars and glaciers, playing out gently inside your chest. Your heartbeat is gravity. Your lungs are atmosphere. Your skin is shoreline. You are a small planet, orbiting your own center. If you could see yourself from above, lying there in the dark, you would notice how peaceful you look. How small, and yet how complete. The stars above you shimmer on the ice, as if bowing their light toward you. Even the wind seems to hush, careful not to disturb your stillness. This is the moment when time stops measuring. There's no past to fix, no future to reach. There's only the gentle now, like snow suspended in the air just before it lands. Somewhere deep beneath the ice, water moves. It's slow, heavy, inevitable, the same water that once covered the world, the same that will one day rise again. You imagine following it, sinking through the layers of cold, into the dark blue below. But instead of fear, you feel weightless. The deeper you go, the quieter everything becomes. No thoughts, no names, no edges. Just being. You open your eyes, and it's not dark at all. The ice above you glows with trapped light green, blue, and silver of frozen aurora. Tiny bubbles of air drift around you like constellations. They move slowly, like memories finding their place. Each one holds a story. A forest that burned, a storm that passed, a breath from a creature long gone. You reach out, and they swirl around your hand. You realize then the world remembers everything, but not with judgment. Just with care. When you rise back to the surface, the air greets you gently. You open your eyes to a sky filled with stars. They look closer now, not like distant points, but like friends keeping watch. The horizon glows faintly, not from cities, but from reflected moonlight on endless snow. You can't tell where Earth ends and sky begins. It's all one thing. Now, come back to your body. Feel your fingers, your chest, your breath. Each inhale pulls the world a little closer. Each exhale lets it rest. You might notice small details now, the rhythm of your pulse in your wrists, the temperature of the air on your cheeks, the faint hum in your ears that only appears in silence. That hum is your body's version of the Earth's rotation. Constant, quiet, unnoticed until now. If your mind starts to wander to tomorrow, to tasks, to worries, that's fine. Just notice it and bring it back with a single thought. I am here. Because here is enough. Here is infinite. When glaciers moved, they didn't hurry. When mountains rose, they didn't force. They simply allowed time to do what it does best, unfold. You can do the same. There is no race in existence. You are allowed to rest, to breathe, to be unfinished. Let your body feel heavier now, as if gravity is cradling you instead of pulling you down. Your spine softens into the surface beneath you. Your hands relax. Your face loosens its masks. You are melting into stillness, not disappearing, just becoming part of the background again, like snow joining the ground. The world outside you continues quietly, steadily. Trees exhale oxygen into the night. Wolves walk the frozen ridges. Somewhere, a glacier shifts and sighs. The universe keeps its rhythm, and you, without effort, are part of it. In and out. That's the entire story. Creation, destruction, memory, breath, all in one motion. Stay here for a while. Let the cold of imagination become warmth in your chest. Let the silence become comfort, not emptiness. Let the earth's slow heartbeat remind you that even stillness is movement. When you finally open your eyes again, whether that's in a few moments or after sleep, the world will still be here. The same, yet different. Because you'll be hearing it differently. You'll notice how every sound, the hum of the fridge, the murmur of wind, has a kind of rhythm that matches your breath. The world isn't noisy, it's singing. You just needed to slow down enough to hear it. Now, one last breath. In, the memory of ice. Out, the warmth of being alive. You are part of both. And that balance, that soft, invisible harmony, is what the earth has been teaching since the beginning. If you've been listening from the beginning, you might have noticed something. The longer we wander through this frozen world, the harder it becomes to tell where science ends and story begins. And maybe that's the point, because in truth, they were never separate. The Ice Age is not just an event we study, it's a mirror that reflects how we think, how we believe, and how we remember. The scientist sees in it the elegance of systems, climate feedbacks, orbital rhythms, isotopic traces. The philosopher sees meaning, the reminder that all things change and that endurance is not victory, but understanding. And the mythmaker, the poet, the dreamer sees symbols. Frost as silence, mammoth as memory, light as rebirth. 3 ways of seeing, 3 languages describing the same truth. And together, they form the quiet chorus of Earth remembering itself. Let's gather the threads for a moment, the scientific, the mythical, the philosophical, and see how they weave together. Science tells us that the Ice Age began with geometry. Tiny variations in orbit and tilt altered the balance of sunlight and shadow. That's all it took, a subtle shift, a change in angle, and the world was remade. Myth tells the same story, but differently. It says that gods fought, that frost and fire met and birthed creation. Philosophy listens to both and asks, what is a god, if not a metaphor for forces too large to name? What is geometry, if not divinity, written in numbers? The more we understand the mechanisms, the more miraculous they become. We used to call the cold a curse. Now we see it as the architect of everything we know. Without glaciers grinding mountains into soil, there would be no farmland. Without the floods that followed, there would be no rivers. Without extinction, there would be no space for us to exist. Creation and destruction, opposites only when we forget, they dance together. That's where philosophy steps in to remind us that even data is poetry in a different form. Every graph, every temperature record, every carbon curve is a love letter written by time itself, saying, I was here, I changed, I endured. When myth tells us that giants once ruled the earth, we smile. But science nods quietly, because they did. They just weren't made of legend. They were made of muscle and breath. The mammoth was as real as mountains, and yet as symbolic as gods. To early humans, it was both food and deity, danger and teacher. They didn't separate the physical from the spiritual. They lived inside both at once, and maybe they understood the world more completely than we do. We call ourselves modern, but we've spent centuries trying to divide what they held together. We built walls between reason and wonder, between evidence and awe. But standing in front of a glacier, those walls melt fast. Because in the presence of something so immense, Logic and reverence feel like the same emotion, a long, quiet breath of recognition. The philosopher might say, science explains how the world changes, myth explains why we care, and together they explain what it means. That's the soft synthesis, not competition, but conversation. Each voice necessary, each incomplete alone. The Ice Age, seen through that lens, isn't just prehistory, it's philosophy written in frozen language. It asks us not only how did this happen, but what does it mean that it happened and that we remember? When scientists drill through ice cores and pull up air older than humanity, they speak of concentration and composition. But in those bubbles, philosophers hear confession, the earth revealing its history with tenderness. And myth hears prophecy, the reminder that memory, like frost, always returns. Even extinction fits the pattern. In science, it's an outcome of change. In myth, it's sacrifice. In philosophy, it's renewal. All three are true, depending on the distance from which you look. Take the mammoth again. Its death was a data point. Yes, a shift in population, a line on a graph. But it was also the death of an age, a passing of innocence, the moment when humanity became aware of its own power. The bones in permafrost aren't just evidence. They're mirrors. They show us what happens when adaptation and arrogance meet. And yet they also remind us that nothing truly ends. Every extinction becomes foundation. The calcium of their bones feeds new growth. The carbon in their breath feeds the sky. Even absence creates possibility. It's easy to look at this world and see separation, science here, spirit there, meaning somewhere else. But the Ice Age whispers otherwise. It says everything belongs. Even opposites are just reflections at different temperatures. Think of it like water. In one form, it flows. In another, it freezes. In another, it becomes vapor and vanishes. But it never ceases to be itself. The same is true for knowledge. Science is the flowing form, ever adapting. Philosophy is the solid, the reflection. Myth is the vapor, invisible, ethereal, but always present in the air we breathe. Together, they complete the cycle. Perhaps that's what the earth has been trying to show us all along. That truth is not singular, but seasonal. It shifts shape the way water does, from data to story, from cold to warmth, from silence to speech. And wisdom lies in knowing when to let it change. If you think about it, the Ice Age never truly left. It lives in our bones, in our dreams, in our metaphors. It reminds us that survival is not just a scientific process, but a spiritual one, the will to keep moving even when everything around you has frozen. It's the same resilience that drives glaciers, that grows moss in the dark, that makes a single spark of fire enough to keep hope alive through the longest night. Science shows us the world's body. Philosophy shows us its mind. Myth shows us its heart. And when you see them all together, you realize they are not three things at all, but one, a single consciousness unfolding through time. So when you look at a piece of ice, or a fossil, or even a simple snowflake melting on your palm, remember, you're not just seeing a thing, you're seeing a thought. The earth is thinking, through you, about itself. It always has been, and maybe that's the real purpose of remembering the Ice Age. Not to mourn what was lost, or to fear what might come, but to feel, for a moment, the unity beneath it all. To understand that the same laws that shape glaciers shape grief. The same forces that end species create consciousness. And the same silence that filled the frozen plains still lives quietly inside every one of us, waiting for us to listen. So listen, to the science, to the myth, to the thought. Let them blend until they become one slow, endless sound. The hum of a planet remembering, breathing, dreaming. Somewhere between the last glacier's retreat and the first seed planted in soft, thawed soil, humanity crossed an invisible line. We stopped being part of the Ice Age and became its memory. It's strange to think about, isn't it? That the entire human story, civilization, language, fire, faith fits into the small space left behind by melting ice. The earth warmed, rivers spread, and the world suddenly became possible for us. We like to imagine we conquered the cold, but perhaps it was the other way around. Perhaps the cold shaped us, tested us, carved us the way glaciers carve mountains slowly, painfully, beautifully. For hundreds of generations, our ancestors lived with ice as teacher, not enemy. It taught patience. It taught endurance. It taught the art of reading silence, of knowing when to move and when to wait. And maybe, more than anything, it taught humility, the understanding that life isn't something you control, but something you accompany. When the last ice age ended and the glaciers pulled back into the poles, we began to forget those lessons. Warmth returned. Soil grew fertile. We built cities, grew crops, raised walls. And in that safety, a new kind of distance began, the distance between human and world. The fires that once meant survival became symbols of mastery. We learned to burn everything that stood in our way, forests, fuels, even time. We mistook warmth for victory. But if the earth could speak, I wonder what it would say. Maybe it would remind us that the warmth we built our lives upon is borrowed a pause, not a promise. That the planet doesn't give or take out of cruelty. It simply breathes, in long cycles too vast for us to see. And that if we forget how to listen, the breath will continue without us. When we study the Ice Age now in classrooms, in documentaries, in dreams, we often look for answers about them. The mammoths, the hunters, the frozen worlds. But what we're really studying is us. The Ice Age isn't just a history of climate, it's a history of consciousness. It's the story of how we learned to see time, to look at a stone, a bone, a star, and understand that we were part of something larger. That realization was the true thaw, not the melting of glaciers, but the melting of ignorance. The first moment a human looked at a fossil and thought, "This was before me, time itself was born." Because to imagine before is to awaken after, and to imagine after is to recognize mortality. We became aware of our smallness, and in that smallness found meaning. Every age leaves behind a kind of mirror. The Ice Age left glaciers and bones. Our age will leave satellites and carbon. Both are records of the same thing, the struggle between creation and consequence, one written in ice, the other in air. Sometimes, when you look at the world now, the storms, the heat, the noise, it's easy to think we've lost something sacred, that we've traded stillness for speed, wonder for control, but maybe the sacred was never gone. Maybe it's just quieter, buried under layers of modern ice screens, traffic, ambition, waiting, patient as always, for us to dig it out again. And we can, not by turning back time, but by remembering its rhythm, because what the Ice Age taught is still true. Nothing survives alone. Not a mammoth, not a species, not even a planet. The air we breathe now is made of their breath. The ground we walk on is layered with their bones. Even the water that runs in our veins has passed through their world countless times. There is no separation between their story and ours, only continuity. We often imagine evolution as ascent, a climb toward perfection. But the Ice Age shows it's more like a spiral. The same lessons, returning in new forms, asking if we're ready to learn them again. Balance, adaptation, humility, care. These were the keys to survival then, and they still are now. Imagine, for a moment, the last human who ever saw a living mammoth. We don't know their name or what language they spoke, but somewhere, on a cold morning, they watched the great creature fade into the horizon, slow, deliberate, unaware it was the last of its kind. And perhaps, as the shape disappeared into fog, that person felt something stir inside, not joy, not fear, but a quiet ache, the awareness that an entire era was closing, that a chapter of the earth had turned. That moment lives in us still. We carry it every time a species disappears, every time a forest burns, every time a glacier carving makes the news. The ache is the same, the recognition that endings are never distant. They live right beside beginnings. Yet, even in endings, there is grace. Because the Ice Age did not vanish in violence, it dissolved in light. The ice melted, yes, but it became rivers, oceans, clouds, rain. It didn't die. It changed. It learned a softer form. And perhaps so can we. When we look back now, across tens of thousands of years, we might be tempted to see the Ice Age as something alien, cold, primitive, other. But it was home once, and in many ways, it still is. Because the earth beneath our feet is the same. The stars above our heads haven't moved. The breath in our lungs still carries the rhythm of that ancient world. So maybe the real threshold, the true edge we're crossing, isn't between past and future, but between forgetting and remembering, between seeing the planet as scenery and seeing it as self, between using the world and belonging to it. And when we finally step across that threshold, maybe we'll rediscover something that our ancestors knew instinctively in the dark, that the earth is not a stage, but a relationship. That life is not ownership, but participation. That to live well is to live gently, like snow falling on snow. If we can do that, if we can remember how to breathe in rhythm with the planet again, then perhaps the next age, whatever form it takes, will not need to be a warning. It can be a dialogue, a long, quiet conversation between humanity and the earth, not about who rules, but about how to coexist. Because in the end, the Ice Age wasn't only a story about extinction, it was a story about continuity of how life, no matter how fragile, always finds a way to begin again. So take a breath, in and out. The air you just pulled in once drifted across glaciers, once filled the lungs of creatures you'll never see, once touched the edge of the coldest night. And still, it returned to you warm, gentle, alive. That's what the Ice Age left us. Not bones or fossils, but the simple truth that the world is circular, that nothing truly ends, that every breath is a beginning wearing the shape of memory. And when we finally learn to see ourselves, not as the final chapter, but as a continuation of all that came before, then, maybe, we'll understand what the earth has been saying since the first wind brushed the first snow. I change, therefore I live. And so do you. Some nights, when the world feels too loud, it helps to remember that silence has not disappeared. It has only gone north. Beyond the cities, beyond the hum of power lines and the glow of screens, there are still places where the earth remembers how to breathe in peace. You can hear it in the crack of sea ice drifting apart, in the wind sliding across snowfields untouched for centuries. You can see it in the slow swirl of clouds moving above the poles, the same sky that watched over mammoths, bears, and the first fires built by trembling hands. Every gust, every flicker of light, is a continuation of the same pulse. The memory of the Ice Age isn't locked in the past. It's around us, within us, beneath our feet. Every snowflake that falls is a message written in the planet's oldest language. Remember the rhythm. The glaciers may have retreated, but their presence remains in the way rivers move, the way mountains curve, the way the air cools when the sun dips behind the horizon. Sometimes, it shows up in smaller things, in the frost forming on a window pane in January, in the way you instinctively pull a blanket closer at night, in the smell of rain that once was snow, that once was ice, that once was breath from a world before names. You don't have to go far to touch that history. You're already living inside it. Take a moment now. Look around you, the walls, the air, the dim light in your room. Even here, the past lingers. The calcium in your bones once rested in the shells of prehistoric creatures. The oxygen in your lungs was born from ancient plankton that lived and died long before humans dreamed. The warmth in your blood is the same warmth that once melted the last great glacier. You are the earth remembering itself. Science tells us that the atoms in our bodies are billions of years old recycled stardust, rearranged endlessly since the beginning. But maybe that's just another way of saying what myth has always known, that nothing dies, everything transforms. That memory is the truest form of immortality. If you've ever stood near a melting glacier, you know the sound, a slow, steady drip that feels almost like time itself unraveling. At first, it's beautiful. Then, if you listen long enough, it becomes something else, a confession. Because what melts isn't only ice, it's certainty. The planet is speaking again, and this time, its voice is trembling. We live in an age where the glaciers are vanishing, not growing. And yet, that loss isn't only tragedy, it's testimony. The Earth is showing us its memory in motion, revealing what it has always hidden beneath the cold. And though the revelation is painful, it's also sacred. We are being given the chance to witness change, to feel history breathe through us in real time. In that sense, we are both archaeologists and artifact. We study the past even as we become it. Each breath we take adds a layer to the record: carbon, heat, light, sound. Future beings, whoever they may be, will read the atmosphere the way we read ice cores, and they will know what we chose to remember and what we chose to forget. Maybe that's why the memory of the Ice Age feels so personal, because it isn't just the Earth's story, it's ours. We are its continuation, its experiment, its dream made conscious. When we look at melting ice and feel sadness, that feeling itself is proof of connection. The Earth cannot mourn, so it taught us how. We are its emotional memory, its way of understanding itself through empathy. Imagine, for a moment, that the planet could speak to you directly. What would it say? Maybe not words, maybe only images, sensations. A slow, rhythmic pulse beneath the soil, the coolness of stone, the scent of wet earth after rain. And maybe, beneath all that, a single message. You are not visitors here, you are echoes. Because every living thing that walks, flies, or grows from the ground carries part of that original rhythm, the great inhale and exhale of existence. You can hear it in your own body if you slow down enough. The beat of your heart, the expansion of your lungs, the blood moving like tides, all of it is memory in motion. You are both glacier and fire, both mammoth and human, both yesterday and tomorrow. And that realization that you are made of everything is the quiet miracle of being alive. It's what the Ice Age tried to teach in its long silence and patient beauty. That endurance isn't strength, it's acceptance. That to live is not to resist time, but to move with it, to melt and freeze and melt again. Sometimes, when I walk in winter and the world feels frozen still, I like to imagine that the snow beneath my feet is conscious, that it remembers the first steps ever taken here, the weight of creatures now gone, the songs of winds no one will ever hear again. And for a moment, I feel less alone, because the memory of the planet is not cold, its companionship quiet, ancient, and unconditional. Perhaps that's the real gift of the Ice Age, perspective. It reminds us that we are temporary, but not insignificant, that we live in a story so much older than language, and yet we are allowed to speak within it. The Earth doesn't ask for our perfection, only our attention, to notice, to listen, to be part of the rhythm, not above it. So as you listen now, maybe lying in bed, maybe half asleep, take one more slow breath. Feel the air enter your lungs, soft and cool. That air has been waiting for you for centuries. It has traveled across oceans, through forests, over glaciers. It has circled the planet countless times just to reach this moment, this inhale. That's what continuity feels like, a single, unbroken breath shared between all things. And when you exhale, know that you're sending it back, adding your voice, your warmth, to the song that never ends. Someone else, somewhere, will breathe it next. A child, a tree, maybe, one day, another world. The Earth's memory continues, and through you, it keeps writing, not in words, but in warmth, in kindness, in the decision to notice, because memory isn't just what we keep, it's how gently we live within what's left. And in that gentleness lies the only kind of eternity that matters, to be remembered not for our noise, but for our care. It happens quietly the moment you realize the Earth is breathing. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but truly. Every rise of wind, every pull of tide, every shift in air pressure is part of a pulse that has been beating long before lungs ever existed. You breathe in, and the world breathes with you. You breathe out, and it continues the cycle, a slow exchange between your body and everything that ever lived, the same carbon, the same water, the same heat. We call it atmosphere. The Earth might call it memory. For most of history, we moved in rhythm with that breath without realizing it. Our hearts adjusted to seasons, our sleep to stars, our hunger to the moon. We didn't measure time, we felt it. When winter came, we slowed down. When the thaw began, we woke with it. And somewhere in that rhythm, we belonged completely. But modern life has its own climate, faster, brighter, louder. We have built machines that mimic the sun, cities that never rest, calendars that never forgive. We live as if the world's breath is a distant thing, separate from our own. Yet, even now, beneath the hum of everything we've built, the planet continues its quiet inhale and exhale. It hasn't forgotten. Sometimes you can hear it when everything else stops. In the stillness between raindrops, in the hush that comes before dawn, in the long pause after thunder, when the air seems to listen to itself. That's the earth exhaling a reminder that silence is not absence, but awareness. To be awake to that rhythm is a kind of homecoming. You begin to see that everything, the glaciers, the forests, even the air, moves not in straight lines but in circles. Birth, growth, decay, renewal, expansion, contraction, warmth, cold, the same breath, repeated through eternity, only changing form. We, too, are part of that cycle. We forget it because we name things seasons, eras, epochs as if they are separate. But names are only pauses in motion. The truth is, everything overlaps. The Ice Age didn't end, it just softened. The warmth we live in now is part of the same story, a new stanza in an endless poem. And when you remember that, a kind of calm settles over you, because it means that nothing is wasted. Not the cold, not the heat, not even the mistakes. The earth recycles everything, even its grief. It turns loss into landscape, endings into origins. Every stone you step on was once something living. Every breath you take contains a history of survival. You are not outside that pattern. You are its continuation. And in understanding that, you awaken not in panic, but in peace. Because awakening, at its core, is not about realizing your power. It's about remembering your participation. Look at your hands for a moment. The same calcium that shapes your bones once belonged to seashells, to coral, to ancient fish. The warmth of your blood is borrowed sunlight, stored in food, carried through time. You are not made on the earth. You are made of it. And the earth, through you, is looking back at itself. That's what consciousness truly is, the planet thinking out loud. You, me, every mind that wonders why, all part of its awareness rising like morning fog. We are not separate observers. We are the moment the world became self-aware. When glaciers melted and forests returned, life diversified, and with it, thought. From that thaw came language, art, music, philosophy, all attempts to describe what the world feels like from the inside. We are the earth learning to tell stories about itself. Each question we ask: why did the giants vanish? Why do we remember them? What happens next? Is the same question the planet has been asking through us. And maybe that's what it means to be human, to be both creature and caretaker, both echo and voice. To live at the fragile intersection between knowing and wondering, between science and soul. If you listen now, beneath the quiet of your room, you might notice a hum, the sound of electricity, of wind, of your own heartbeat. That's the sound of continuation. It's not the noise of machines. It's the low vibration of existence itself. You're part of it, like a single cello note inside a vast symphony. And what is awakening, if not hearing that music again? Not to control it, not to analyze it, but simply to remember the tune. The earth doesn't need saving so much as it needs witnessing gentle attention, the kind that transforms awareness into care. Because the moment you notice the planet breathing, you begin to breathe differently, too slower, softer, with reverence. You realize that every inhale is permission, every exhale is gratitude. That to live is to participate in a ceremony older than words, the ceremony of exchange. Light becomes warmth, warmth becomes growth, growth becomes decay, decay becomes life again. It's not philosophy, it's physics, and it's also love. So, when you look at the melting glaciers, or the storms, or the forests fading, try to see not only loss but conversation. The earth is not ending, it's speaking. It's telling us, in the only language it knows, that balance is fragile and attention is sacred. The warmth we enjoy today was once a mercy the planet's gift after eons of cold. Now, it's asking what kind of gift we will return. This awareness doesn't demand guilt. It invites tenderness, because when you care for something deeply, you move slower around it. You listen before acting. You tread lightly. That is how we begin to breathe with the earth again, instead of against it. And in that breathing, that shared rhythm, there's hope. Not the loud kind, but the steady kind, like light returning after the longest night. The same hope that carried our ancestors through the dark. The same hope that whispered to the mammoth as it crossed the snow. The same hope that makes seeds wait patiently beneath frozen ground for the first sign of spring. The earth is patient. It always has been. And patience, like ice, is not weakness, it's strength measured in centuries. So tonight, before you sleep, take one more quiet breath. Feel it move through you, from the world into your lungs, from your lungs back into the world. That's the cycle. That's the truth. That's all there ever was. And if you listen closely enough, beneath the sound of your breathing, you might hear another deeper, slower, eternal. The heartbeat of a planet, vast and tender, still pulsing under everything you know. It's been there since before the first fire, before the first word, before the first sunrise. And it will be there long after, not ending, just exhaling. The night is wide now. The air has softened. Somewhere far away, a glacier breathes for the last time before dawn. And you, small, quiet, listening, are still here. There's a kind of peace that arrives only when everything else stops trying, when the mind finally settles, like snow finding its way to the ground. When words grow tired and silence becomes language again. That's where we are now at the end, but not really, because endings on this planet are never final. They're pauses. They're inhalations between stories. If you could see the Earth from above right now, not from the cold detachment of a satellite, but through the gentle eyes of wonder, you'd see something remarkable. Half the planet asleep, half awake, breathing in perfect rhythm. A slow pulse of light moving from east to west as cities flicker out one by one. A shimmer of clouds. A heartbeat of oceans. A dream. Still unfolding. That's the secret no history book tells you. The Earth never stopped dreaming. It dreamed of oceans before they existed. It dreamed of forests and mammals and the slow thaw of ice. It dreamed of you. Every thought you've ever had, every spark, every question, every quiet ache is part of that same dream, continuing itself in a new form. When you sleep tonight, you return to it. You'll fall into the same rhythm the planet knows, a slow descent into warmth and dark. Your breath will match its tides. Your heartbeat will echo its core. And somewhere deep in the silence beneath your bones, the earth will keep humming, not loudly, just enough to remind you that you never left. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the continents as blankets drifting, folding, touching, the mountains as shoulders, the oceans as slow-moving thoughts, the wind a soft murmur through its lungs. This planet is not a rock, it's a body. And every living thing upon it, from the whale to the bird to you, is one of its dreams made briefly visible. When the Ice Age ended, it didn't wake up, it changed dreams. The glaciers melted into rivers. The cold turned into song. Life shifted from silence to speech. But the dream continued quieter, deeper, waiting for us to listen. That's what these stories have been about all along. Not just the giants or the cold, not even the science or the myth, but the reminder that we belong to something that never sleeps, even when we do. The earth doesn't die, it transforms. And we, every one of us, are its evidence of continuation. You can feel that if you're still enough. The faint vibration of air against your skin, the slow beat behind your ribs, the rise and fall that's older than thought. You are the pulse of something enormous, something ancient and impossibly gentle. It's easy to forget that when life feels loud, when time feels short, and days collapse into noise. But the earth has waited billions of years for you. It will wait still. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand. It only invites. To rest. To breathe. To remember. In the quiet hours, when everyone else is asleep, the planet hums differently. There's a low sound in the soil, a frequency that only silence can hear. That's the sound of tectonic plates moving slower than thought, of magma whispering beneath continents, of ancient seas adjusting their tides. And in that sound, that deep, eternal vibration, you exist, not apart from it, but inside it. The same elements that forge stars are moving gently within you right now. Hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, the alphabet of existence. Every time you breathe, you rearrange the cosmos slightly. Every time you close your eyes, you give the universe permission to dream again through you. That's what sleep really is, not escape, but return. Return to rhythm, to the larger consciousness that birthed you. The body forgets the illusion of separation, and the mind drifts back into the current of the earth's dreaming. The hum beneath your heartbeat grows louder until it becomes everything. If you listen closely, you'll hear it. The sound of snow melting somewhere far away, the quiet glide of water under ice, the slow settling of continents, the sigh of wind moving through forests that once were frozen fields. It's not random. It's memory, shifting shape. It's the same song that began long before language, the song of becoming. And you, lying there in the warmth of your present age, are the latest verse. Every breath you take adds a note. Every dream you have continues the melody. The earth is not done singing. It never will be. Perhaps one day, far in the future, someone else, human or not, will stand where you stand and wonder about us. They'll dig into the soil and find the traces of our cities, our metals, our bones. They'll call it another age, another epoch. They'll ask what kind of beings we were, what we believed, what we feared. And maybe, in the layers we leave behind, they'll find more than ruin. Maybe they'll find tenderness, a record of a species that, for a moment, remembered it was part of a larger dream. Because that's all that truly matters, not permanence, but participation, not mastery, but belonging. The giants had their time, and so do we. The question isn't how long we last, but how gently we live within the time we're given. So, as the story fades, let your breath slow again. In and out. In and out. The rhythm doesn't end here. It continues in rivers, in stars, in someone else's lungs 1,000 years from now. You don't have to hold the world together. It's already holding you. You don't have to remember everything. The earth remembers for you. All you have to do is rest to return to that soft hum beneath everything, the one that says, "You are home, you always were." And when you fall asleep tonight, don't think of it as the end of listening. Think of it as joining the choir, because as you dream, the earth dreams with you of ice, of light, of breath, of life. And when morning comes, when the first light touches the horizon, the dream will change again, as it always has. The giants are gone, the glaciers are memories, but the song continues. And if you're quiet enough, if you breathe softly enough, you can still hear it. The lullaby of a living world, whispering through time, carrying everything that ever was into everything that will ever be. Sleep well. The earth is still awake.